You come prepared this time. Welcome back, Victor.
Come prepared with quite a different energy, I'd say.
Ah, that's nice. That's nice. And I see you before we started, you started writing down a bunch of stuff that you want to talk about. So you're ready. You're pumped up.
Pumped.
Much appreciated. Big welcome back. How do you say your last name when you speak English?
Salander. Victor Salander.
Yeah.
I looked it up some time ago where that name comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And Sala is a Swedish city.
Yeah.
I don't even remember where it is, but there used to be a silver mine in Sala.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there are these something Ander family names in Sweden. And one theory is it has something to do with the male surname Anders,
Mm-hmm.
Anders. So, like, there was a guy who was named Anders who came from the city of Sala. Might be it.
Could be.
But it sounds, for me, it sounds very Latin, like Salander, Santander.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's quite...
I would agree with that.
Works globally.
My name is terrible in English. It's pretty bad in Swedish as well. Alyosha. Originally it's pronounced Alyosha. Then in Sweden we Swedified it to Alyosha, and then in English it just never made sense. So I've always gone by a nickname when I'm in the US or somewhere English speaking, because Alyosha it just doesn't work. Can't do it.
Yeah. It could be like al, like the in Arabic, and then something else.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised no one has ever thought that I'm like from that part of the world, or that tried to spell it like al and dash Yosha or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's never happened. I've had a bunch of people think that when they just see my name in writing that I'm a female, because they feel like Alyosha is a female name. No.
Like Aisha or something.
Could be. Yeah.
But like Alyosha sounds almost a bit like a nickname in Russian.
It is.
It is a nickname.
It's a nickname for Alexei.
Ah, okay. That's why I recognize it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard people be called Alyosha.
Yeah. Both my brother and I got Russian nicknames for our names.
When you got your names in Sweden?
No. When we got our names when we were born.
Okay.
Because in Yugoslavia, you can immediately tell which ethnicity someone has and religion by their name, generally.
Okay.
And my parents wanted to avoid that. They've never felt like, any specific Yugoslavian ethnicity. They always felt like Yugoslavia is one people, one country.
Okay.
So they wanted to give us names that don't immediately put us in one of these boxes that are
in harm's way.
Yeah.
In the crosshairs of someone.
They saw something coming, maybe.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
It was very. Yeah.
Foreseeing.
Yeah, very foreseeing.
But now I have a Russian nickname, so
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a Russian very good friend from high school. He was officially named Misha when he moved to Sweden.
Right.
But his actual name is Mikhail.
Yeah.
But then now everyone in Sweden calls him Misha.
Yeah.
And like he's living abroad now. He's also called Misha.
Yeah.
No one calls him Mikhail apart from his mother.
Yeah. There's a few of those in English as well. Like people call Dick. They're really Richard, and Bill is usually William. There's a bunch of these names that are just you're always known by your nickname.
I mean, as many things in language, people could be saying language deteriorates, like it's being simplified, and part of it, I think, is migration. Like a lot of migration tends to mellow out these nuances in language, or like new nuances come up. But yeah, the older generation is always saying like, we're bastardizing the language. But I mean, I guess it's changing. Names is such a thing that seems to be getting simpler and simpler, kind of.
I'm sure that goes.
But maybe it goes in waves.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Kids nowadays, they're named like their grandparents, kind of. And then goes in waves.
Yeah, usually does that. Last time you were here, we spoke in Swedish. Now we're here speaking in English. How come?
I requested it. I think like the main topic that we might be discussing quite a lot today quite a global one.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a timeless one. Even though we will get into, when we get into the thick of it, I'll also be speaking about that it's maybe ever more present and even more of an actuality for people nowadays than it used to be, namely cancer. And it's very much an actuality for me, as I dropped the news in our last time speaking, that I had just been diagnosed with spread cancer. So that's like a stage 4 cancer. And since we met last time, when was that? It was like,
I think it was somewhere in July.
Yeah. So we met like 4 days after I got the diagnosis or something.
Crazy.
So my energy levels weren't that high. Hadn't slept well either.
Yeah.
So I'll be bringing more energy to this conversation. I'll be as informative as I can. And that's why I want it to be in English as well. So we can get this information out that I feel is valuable and has been very valuable for me in my case. So I think it's going to be useful for some people out there.
Yeah, that's great.
And English is a bit more of a wider reach than Swedish.
A little bit. No, that sounds great. Yeah, you mentioned that last time we talked. I think it was a Wednesday, and you were told on Friday the week before that. So not even a week after your diagnosis, you sat down to talk to me, and I very much appreciated that you did that, because obviously we had a great conversation, and obviously I know that the part of you probably wanted to skip it because you had other shit to think about. But you came, you spent your time, valuable time with me, and I very much appreciated it. And the lower energy you mentioned, it's not something that I noticed, at least. So I couldn't tell.
I'll give you some contrast today.
Yeah, sounds good. But I didn't suspect anything like that, and then suddenly, like 2 hours into the conversation, you dropped the bomb. I'm like, oh shit.
Maybe that's telling as well. Like, we as modern day humans, we're quite good at keeping a mask on. So I kind of kept the mask on for first part of our conversation. Then I dropped that mask. So I think it's also an interesting aspect of the whole thing, of also being seriously ill. Like, how do you approach that in terms of communicating to other people? How do you want to approach it when you socialize with other people? I felt a really clear difference in terms of energy level, for example, or tolerance to stimuli or like stressors in your environment, where you might, before your diagnosis, you might have had a different tolerance level. And I feel like that's also been a journey I've been on, which we'll probably get into.
For sure. Do you also feel that the tolerance level is different with other people? You mentioned this whole thing, like how to communicate with people when you have a serious illness. I know not everyone, a lot of people can get uncomfortable. Like if you would tell someone that you have stage 4 cancer, that a lot of people don't know how to act, and like, treat you differently suddenly, or talk in a different way because they're worried about offending you or whatever, Yeah. Is that something you've experienced, or?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I wouldn't have expected beforehand was how different people react, and how differently people approach you when they're given this information. Yeah. And how differently they respond emotionally to this information. And I think there are many layers to why that is. One might be that some people might have a difficulty handling how this makes them having to think about their own possibility of getting a lethal illness,
their own mortality,
like suddenly being faced with death. And they might have had that in their history as well, their personal history. They might be scarred because of some personal trauma, which of course needs to be understood and like empathized with. But it's very clear how different people react differently when faced with someone close to them, or maybe not super close to them, breaking the news that they have serious illness. One thing I noticed was there is a risk if people just sympathize or like empathize with you, but they're not really fully there listening to you. It's like I had a feeling when I started breaking the news to some people that they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you," and then there was like a distance being created. It was like, okay, I'm really sorry. I hope for the best in terms of, okay, let's hope for that this treatment that you're gonna get supposedly is gonna help you. But that was about it.
Yeah.
But what I noticed personally when I got this diagnosis was my whole mindset shifted. Before getting a diagnosis, that's when I was very worried because I didn't know what the hell was going on. I had these vague symptoms going on for weeks, and I was basically in the hands of the first line primary healthcare system to get a diagnosis, to even get tested, to properly get tested, to end up with a diagnosis. So that was my big period of worrying, which took like 6 weeks or more, where I felt powerless. I felt like I didn't have it in my own hands to control the situation or what the hell was going on. And then once I got the diagnosis, obviously the first few days, as I alluded to in our last time speaking, I looked at the stats, which I think most people, if they use the internet, they're going to look at the stats for their diagnosis, and they're going to see like for any cancer diagnosis, especially if it's spread, they're going to see a curve, which is like, try and depict it. It's like rate of death. So how quickly people die of this disease.
Right.
And it's like it's like a curve that's slowly getting thinner and thinner. And then by the end of it, you still have people surviving for quite a long time, but it's like the tail of the dispersion of the distribution.
It's the exceptions.
Exactly. But then you have to keep in mind, like, okay, who are you as an individual when you contract this disease?
Right.
I'm relatively young. I think of myself as having relatively healthy habits, even from before, and I'll be getting into how I tweak those habits quite aggressively as well to try and improve my chances. So anything you can do to improve on your odds, that will increase the chances of you ending up on that tail end of the curve.
Right.
And I think there's also a learning to be made that most people might not be making all of those adjustments in their lifestyle, because making changes to your habits and your lifestyle and your life goals can be quite hard to do.
Yep.
And upon talking, like now that I've had this for a few months and I've reached out and I've started to send out quite a lot of social media content regarding my journey. I've gotten in touch with more and more other cancer patients, and in some of them I do feel kind of a reticence, like a kind of force that they don't want to change too much. Like they still want to be able to live life is kind of a quote you can hear recurringly, like, I still want to be able to go out and have fun. But if you go too much towards not adjusting your life to this new situation, then you're not going to be able to adjust your habits. And no one will know exactly the formula for everything to perfectly line up to fight this disease, but you most probably will have to adjust something if you want to improve your odds. It's not just about enjoying life in my view. It's the way I approach it is a fucking war. Like I'm in a war now. I never did military service, but this is my war. I feel like I'm in a bunker. I was literally in a bunker. Like after we spoke, I kind of hid in my bunker for 2 months, just tweaking everything I could and bearing with the treatment and trying to adjust and fine tune and just tinker with everything I could, and like reading hundreds of scientific papers. So if you don't make any adjustments, even if you accept the healthcare program and what they give you in terms of treatment, you're not really helping your odds. And I think it's a very important aspect of getting a diagnosis. How do you want to support yourself in this situation? Do you want to take ownership, or do you want to give away that ownership to a system, to a doctor? Because obviously they have their part to play, unless you want to just veer away from everything in terms of conventional treatment and you're going on this whole side route, which I think is also a risky thing to do. So you most probably want to accept some kind of conventional treatment, whatever that will be, if you have a serious disease. It's not all like propaganda about taking some poison that's going to destroy you but never do you any good. But then you have to think about, what do you want to do in this situation?
Right.
And there's also a psychological aspect to that. Just feeling that you're doing something, feeling that you're having at least a partial ownership in this very serious situation, it's going to help you get up in the morning. It's going to help you strive for something on the margins, because it's always on the margins. Life is so complex that there's never like a one size fits all solution or a perfect formula on how to solve this. It's like any life crisis. It could be biological in terms of a disease. It could be like a relationship that's you're struggling with.
Yeah.
It's never like, oh, you take this course and now your life crisis is suddenly evaporating. It's like now you see the light and you feel this inner harmony. No, it's a journey. You have to like nudge things in a direction that you feel is better than another direction.
Right. All the small steps we take today affect greatly our future, pretty much.
Yeah. And what I felt in this crisis situation, it's a lot about habits, like adjusting your habits and finding, in engineering language, finding processes. Yeah.
Before we get into that, give us a reminder. What was the diagnosis you received, and how far along was it when you received it, and so on?
Yeah, a quick recap. So I was on a vacation, lovely vacation in Italy, in Tuscany, with my girlfriend. We spent about 2 weeks there. There was like a 3-4 day wedding of a couple of our friends set up on a hill. We like the whole group, the wedding group, had reserved really nice monastery, like an old stone monastery, just beautiful scenery, beautiful wedding. But during this time, when we had like a week left on our vacation, I started feeling a lump on the side of my neck. Not a huge lump. It's literally like a lymph node. So if you have an infection, like a virus or bacteria, you get the flu, you might have fever, and sometimes you get this like a lymph node that's swollen in your neck.
I get those every now and then.
Like around your loin area, close to your like loins and groin. I've gotten them a few times, and there's nothing else about it. Like sometimes you don't have any other symptoms. It's just a bit swollen. Yeah. And I didn't have any other symptoms. So I went home, waited a week, went back to work. And then I started feeling these diffuse symptoms. Like I felt some pulsating pain or throbbing pain, some heat around my neck area. I couldn't sleep properly. I felt like my energy levels were off. And I think I also gradually started worrying more and more about what this was. So I couldn't properly sleep. Went to primary care, which in Sweden means you're first going to this very generalist practitioner that kind of has a manual on how to act when meeting any symptoms that are like baseline symptoms. And if they wouldn't know, they just refer you to a specialist or to emergency. And there he was kind of the guy I was meeting. He was very passive about the whole thing. He gave me an ultrasound a month away. But then a few days later, I couldn't sleep again. So I went to the emergency unit, and then they just sent me back home. They didn't see anything, and then I went there a few days later, and with every time going, I got like maybe an extra blood test. And by like the 6th time I was there, they finally realized that, okay, maybe we should test for this. So weeks had passed, and there was a miscommunication. In total, it took like 6 weeks for me to get tested in terms of them doing a biopsy there.
Mm-hmm.
And then by that time, I'd also noticed 2 other things here. So they tested those 3, and what came up was that I had cancer, which did not originate in the lymph system. Rather, it originated somewhere else in the body. What they did there was they did a PET scan, basically a whole body PET scan, where you're fed sugar, because that's an interesting aspect we'll get into. Cancer cells in general, they love sugar, they love glucose.
Mm-hmm.
So you're fed sugar, you have to fast beforehand, then you're fed sugar, and about an hour later, when the sugar has been taken up by your body, and especially by the cancer cells, the sugar you were fed, it's radioactive.
Mm-hmm.
So the PET scan will read off what you're giving out as radioactivity with the glucose being taken up in your body.
Right.
And what they saw then was a really strong signal here.
Right in the middle of your chest, I guess.
In the middle of my chest, in the front part.
Right.
So where the esophagus that you swallow food with meets the gut.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a muscle, a sphincter muscle that's opening and closing when you're swallowing food.
Mm-hmm.
And that area, that's where the primary tumor's at.
Okay.
And it was like 3 centimeters was what they saw when they went in to confirm it. So then they went in with this gastroscopy, so like an endoscope, big hose that they're bringing down your throat. And then they're optically confirming. If they're able to, they want to optically confirm what they saw on the scan. So then they could confirm that the primary thing was actually there. And it was around 3 centimeters wide.
Okay. Is that a lot, or?
I mean, there are many tumors that are bigger than that. So
Okay.
I would say the size of the primary tumor is not the big thing in my case. The location is a bit tricky, because if I want to do surgery, they would remove that whole muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean I cannot close my esophagus. And the gut is very acidic, so you would get acid reflux up.
Okay.
And the way they do the surgery, they might be able to stop a bit of that, but you would basically have acid reflux for the rest of your life. So I want to stay away from that surgery as long as possible.
Understandable.
Because I had a stint of acid reflux in one of my treatment cycles, and I couldn't sleep.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Ugh.
Because when you're reclining, if you're reclining a little bit, the acid is just coming up. And when it was at its worst during like 3-4 days, I couldn't recline at all when sleeping. So I was like collapsing, sleeping 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
And then I woke up with just acid in my mouth. And it was just, you feel like, you know, if you have like a bit of a sore throat, but this was just all around the throat and the mouth.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to learn, or like realizing that I could try and sleep sitting.
Yeah.
which is a thing. Like, I think maybe not too big a thing, but there are some Tibetan monks who, when they're doing intensive retreats, they're sitting, sleeping. So I found a blog post about how I think a German guy, he was trying to do that. And the main thing you need to think about is to tie your forehead back.
Right.
Because if you don't, your head is going to slump, and then you're going to wake up.
Yeah.
So I had this set up for 2-3 days where I was sleeping, sitting.
Did
until
it work?
Luckily the acid reflux came out. It dissipated.
Okay. But could you sleep like that, sitting up?
Yeah, I was able to sleep continuously for like 3-4 hours. And then I woke up, and then I could sleep again. So I think I got almost a full night's sleep, at least 1 or 2 of those days.
And it helped with the acid?
Yeah, I think it might help, because if you're having continuous acid reflux, it's probably not good for, I mean, it's going to irritate your throat and esophagus and that whole area. So if it's constantly irritated, it probably doesn't help to alleviate the symptoms. But I still don't know exactly why I got it, but I'm suspecting it had something to do with what I'll get to later about the whole thing that I'm using fasting, water fasting, so not eating anything.
Right.
In conjunction with my chemotherapy and my systemic treatment. And when you're fasting, you're turning off your gut. If you fast for several days, no calories, your whole gastrointestinal system, your gut, is going to turn itself off.
Right.
And then when you start eating again, you need to be very mindful about how you do that. And I think I wasn't paying enough attention to the details. So
got it.
It might have been some mistiming, some mismatch there.
So your gut reacted.
My gut reacted. I think that was it. But that's been one of my challenges too. We'll get to the fasting thing, because it's I would say it's probably the biggest learning, the biggest nugget of information that I'd bring to anyone who's about to get systemic therapy in terms of like very toxic chemo.
Right.
But yeah, let's not rush. We'll get there, because fasting is not just for chronically ill people or like people with serious diseases. I'm now like an evangelist of fasting.
Yeah.
It's on the border of having become a religion to me. Like, even if I could erase any cancer cell from my body tomorrow, I would still be fasting for an extended period of time, several times a year, because I've seen it firsthand. It's so powerful.
Yeah. No, I'm doing just periodic fasting, and I've noticed a major shift.
So just like skipping breakfast, or
yeah, exactly. Only eating between 12 and 6:30, 7.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do longer, just water fasts. Just try it out. I haven't gotten to it yet.
Do it. Just think about how to think about what your natural diet is going into the fast, like what you're eating before you start the fast, but also how to start refeeding.
Right.
It's not rocket science, but you kind of have to tweak it and test it out.
Yeah. Was it in that first scan where they figured out where they saw the 3 centimeter tumor, that they also saw all of the other the lymph nodes lighting up, or?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they already knew that there were things here.
Yeah.
But that was also confirmed with the scan, and then they confirmed that it stretched quite widely. So that's why it's stage 4 rather than stage 3. If it had spread to the lymphatic system, but only in the adjacent region, just around the GEJ, which is called like this gastroesophageal junction, where my primary sits, it would have been staged as stage 3. But as soon as it's spread distantly from that primary area, it's staged as stage 4.
Got it.
And that means it has spread up here to the cervical region, but it had also spread down towards the gut area, like along the spine to like a medial position of the torso, but supposedly not all the way to the loins, to the iliac region. But I'm a bit suspicious there, because in the last month or so, I've felt a lot of activity in the lymph nodes in that region, like around where the legs meet the hip. So I'm not fully convinced that you can 100% trust the scans, because they only have a certain level of precision.
Okay.
They can only detect things that are at least, I think it's at least half a centimeter in size.
Got it.
Or maybe even 1 centimeter.
Is there more accurate scanning available?
It's an interesting one, because the first time they do a scan on any cancer patient in Sweden, you're going to get the PET scan, which is gold standard, I would say. because that one is using the glucose metabolism of cancer to detect the cancer cells. And with that first scan, they're also doing a CT, so a computer tomography, where it's like an X-ray, but a bit more detailed. So they're gonna look at the density of your tissue, and cancer cells tend to have a different type of density. But the second follow-up scan, interestingly, they don't do a PET in Sweden. I think it's a budget issue.
Okay.
I haven't had it confirmed, but my suspicion is they had to make a budget decision somewhere,
right,
in terms of the cost of scanning people.
Right.
And where should they do that? They cannot do it on the first scan, because that's like, you need to do precision on the first scan. But then I think on the second scan, there's two questions to be asked. What will new information about the spread of cancer do in terms of giving an indication that we need to adjust our treatment? And there, even if you would see that it's spread to new locations, with most patients, you would still be going with the same type of treatment. And also, most people will survive at least until after the first follow-up scan, so the second scan.
Yeah.
Which means it's a big bulk of people that needs to be scanned. And they might reason that, okay, even if this CT scan doesn't pick up on new signals, because I think it's quite rare that they're going to pick up on new metastases that have spread to new locations with this. They're basically doing an A/B comparison to the first one. So my theory there is they just like, okay, this is the big bulk of follow-up scans. Let's cut the budget here. And then on the third one, you're going to get the PET scan.
Right.
So it's like a big budget saving thing.
Got it.
Which might cause some issues for some patients.
And what's the, how much time is it between these scans?
I think in Sweden, the standard is you do 4 treatment rounds. And those rounds could have different lengths. In my case, up until just recently, my treatment rounds, or what I call my treatment cycles, they've been 14 days long.
Okay. So after your first scan, you do the treatments. After 4 cycles, you get the second scan. Yeah.
So I had the scan, and then it took like 2-3 weeks until we started treatment, because I was looking for alternatives and I didn't find any, unless I would be moving to the US for treatment, basically for some clinical trial, which is quite a hassle. So I joined the standard recommended treatment. And after starting, there were 4 rounds, so 8 weeks basically, until I got the first follow-up scan, which was 2 weeks ago.
Got it.
And then now we have another 4 cycles before I have the second follow-up.
Got it. Where the PET returns.
Yeah, the return of the PET. Getting glucose into my body, which I don't want in any other instance than when they're scanning me. So it's also an interesting perspective of cancer we'll get to with glucose and that whole thing. Yeah.
All right. So tell us about the treatment. What happened after you got your diagnosis, and how do you get like alternatives, or is it like this is the treatment, and how does it work, and what do you do?
Yeah, it all depends on what type of cancer you have. So one level to look at what type of cancer you have is, where does it stem from? What was the original cell, or the original cells in your body? What type of cells were those that turned into cancer cells?
Right.
And on the roughest level, that would be in what organ did it originate? But then you could go deeper and say, okay, it originated in this area of the body, but what was the actual type of cell in that organ that originated in this cancer?
Right.
So in my area, around the region between the gut and the esophagus, there are basically 2 main types of cells that could originate into a cancer, and I have one of them. And the next thing you look at is, okay, what are the alternatives in terms of treatment for this? And for some types of cancers, research has come further. So there's a larger variety of options. You have a bigger arsenal, a bigger portfolio of potential treatments.
Right.
And for others, like mine, the options are a bit more limited, but things have happened in the last few years, which has enabled some additional treatments in addition to the bread and butter, the gold standard, as they call it, which is for most cancers, especially the solid tumors, so the ones that are not in the blood, the non-lymphoma type cancers. So that would be any solid tumor, such as the one I have, or if it's in the lungs or in the breasts or in the pancreas or in the brain. All of those are like solid tumors.
Got it.
And for those, the gold standard is still chemotherapy as a systemic treatment. So you're getting it into your system-wide. And that is always the case if you have a spread tumor. If you have a tumor that's only local, so you can't see on the scan that it's spread to distant regions or to other regions, the healthcare system could be recommending the more local treatments to start and not even go on with the systemic treatment.
Right.
That would mean you could get away with only getting radiation and or surgery.
Right.
Which is not necessarily less damaging or less risky, but but if it's spread, you need to go with systemic therapy, basically, if you're going the conventional route.
Yeah.
And when I was thinking about chemotherapy, I mean, as soon as you Google it, you see all the downsides of it, and there are clear downsides to any systemic
it's basically
chemotherapy.
Poison.
Yeah, in Swedish it's called cellgift, right?
Yeah.
Which is literally translated as cell poison or cellular poison. And I think it's a more apt, more suitable term.
Yeah.
Chemotherapy, it's like a euphemism. You know, euphemism, like they're softening the blow of the term. You're like, oh, it's chemical and it's therapeutic.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds nice. But in Swedish, you could call it cellular poison, which is exactly what it is. It's targeting widely the mechanism that all of our body cells have, where in order for our organism to survive, our cells need to divide and multiply, because our cells will grow old. They will deteriorate at a single cell level, so they need to divide. We need like our stem cells. We need our body's cells to keep dividing. And chemotherapy does target that. So in different ways, depending on the type of chemotherapy, it's gonna make use of that your body's cells are dividing.
Right.
And the rationale is that cancer cells divide quicker and more often than your other cells, your healthy cells, which is partially true. But then there are many cellular populations in your body. A prominent example is your gut, where your cells divide a lot. I don't remember the half time of your gut, but I think your gut is replaced fully. Your gut lining, the cells in your gut lining, your healthy cells, they're replaced fully in like a week or two, which means there will be a lot of cells dividing in your gut whilst you're getting this therapy. And chemo then does so that it does something to put a stick in the machinery to
slow it down,
to kind of break the whole machinery of cell division, which means you're breaking the architecture of the cell, and it's going to break down, or it's going to become a damaged cell that could lead to issues straight away, or it could lead to issues later down the line. You even have the potential of secondary metastases due to chemotherapy.
What does that mean?
So like you could in the future, it's not like a super high chance, but if you're getting chemotherapy, even if it would eradicate your cancer cells, because of the damage done by the chemotherapy itself, you could potentially get a new metastases.
Cause another cancer somewhere else.
Because of the damage that the chemotherapy itself has done.
It is a crazy idea, chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Whoever thought of that? That was.
I mean, it all came from.
It's a crazy idea.
It all came from war, like biological warfare.
Oh, really?
So like mustard gas was one of the first chemos, and
that shit's banned in war even.
During First or Second World War, they identified that just by chance it kind of seemed to have an effect on cancer.
Wow.
So they were like, okay, let's think about using this biological poison on patients in civil society.
Damn.
And then it became this big medical industry.
Crazy.
As many other inventions,
Yeah.
they came through war, which is, I guess it's an indication of where we put our resources.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I was just reading this book called How to Hide an Empire, and it's pretty much about the U.S. history and how it has been an empire from the beginning. And they talk about World War II and how great it was for U.S. industry and innovation, because obviously they were spared from attacks on their own grounds,
like Sweden.
But they also supplied the entire Allied world with everything. So this required a lot of innovation, and there was a tremendous like boom in both engineering and medicine and a bunch of technologies. So yeah,
and like the whole war, the sea war in the Atlantic. The more I think about it, I'm not a buff on Second World War. I don't know the details, but I know the Americans started to get, if I'm correct in my knowledge, one of the reasons the Americans started to get gradually more involved was because there were so many conflicts in the Atlantic. So maybe part of the reason was they needed to protect their own supply chains.
Yeah,
because they need to sell these stuff to keep their economic machinery growing.
Of course, it's all about perspectives. I guess the Germans would say we were attacking those ships because they were supplying weapons to the people we were attacking. So, but yeah, for sure, there was a lot of supply lanes being shut down.
Yeah, but since then, America has kind of tried to own global supply chains quite heavily with use of protective military force. Like when new resource types have come up and been exhausted or like exploited and discovered around the world, America's most often been the one there to be very quickly on point and be there. But
of course, they won the war.
But I guess there have always been precursors to what America has done. That's the thing with empire, right?
Yeah,
you need to secure the resources in order for the empire to sustain itself.
Of course,
an empire needs to have a surplus of resources so it can like retain, conserve the power, the concentration of power among the elite, and then that elite will strengthen itself and find enough allies in the fringes of the empire to keep the borders intact. And like an empire cannot really just be stable. Like a smaller nation can be quite stable and like stay to a similar size, but an empire needs to grow, otherwise it's gonna shrink.
Yeah, that's how it usually goes. What's cool about the U.S. empire though, after World War II is that they also started protecting everyone else's shipping, which was very nice of them. Not a lot of winning superpowers have done something like, or none. No winning superpowers have ever done something like that after a major war. The U.S. decided to protect worldwide shipping. Of course, they had their reasons. They wanted to, since they were pretty much the only market that was not decimated by the war, everyone would be selling to the U.S. market, so they were making money off of it. But still, it gave the world, 70 years of peace and prosperity, pretty much.
Yeah,
but as empires do, they got a little bit cocky, and now we're seeing the results.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting, like empire building, and as you say, there are some indirect benefits of it for humanity. And if you read the history books on like Napoleon or one of the big Chinese emperors, or I mean even like Mao Zedong or someone more contemporary that of course did a lot of bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
One of the relatively good things that is often described in history books are these standardizations, like standardizations of measures and processes. And
that was huge after World War II.
And that's like, it's kind of hygiene factor for increasing globalization. If we all stick to our own standards, I mean, typical thing is currency. Like I'm not a fan of the US dollar, but it did become a global currency. And just the fact that you have a global currency is helping a lot in terms of facilitating and lubricating trade. And you have those, like throughout history, when you look at the big empires, there was some kind of standardization. Like the Mongolians, they introduced like very efficient couriers where they had like horses that were manned at specific distances, so they could send information across their wide empire, which stretched the whole of Eurasia in no time in relative measures. Like China had a lot of during some dynasties, they had a lot of infrastructure efficiencies that spread throughout the empire, and like Rome had a lot of stuff as well.
Of course.
Interesting thing though with Rome, they had aqueducts, which are always like embraced as one of the big things. But what I learned when I was in Italy this summer was, before the Roman Empire, the Etruscans had maybe just as good systems for transporting water, which were underground, and these were covered by the Romans. Like they just sacked and pillaged and razed those. So often it's like there's a switch, but not necessarily starting from scratch. And one thing I was thinking about now with the US empire, and you said like controlling global supply chains, is containerization. So like standardizing containers.
Right.
I have a book at home which I need to get to, but as many books, they're just laying there. It's about how, I think like internally in the US, there was on the Hudson River, I think they started with standardizing containers. And then there was a big lobbying going on for that to become a global standard. And obviously, like some US corporations benefited hugely in the initial stages of standardizing this. That's always going to be the case. If you standardize, there are some people that are the front runners in terms of lobbying and setting the standards, and they're going to get like a big deal out of it initially. But then you get a standard that is more global, and it's going to make things more efficient. But then again, I don't want a world federation of standards and governance. So part of me is very, very much against it in terms of the downsides of like having a world federation. Yeah,
it's a complicated thing, this whole empire building business. But we don't seem to be able to get away from it. Every now and then, a new superpower tries to do something crazy, and that's the history of the world, pretty much.
Yeah, I think it's just we're evolving as a society, as a species. We're evolving to have like gradually increasing levels of complexity, and it just goes to show, like, there's this novel about the pencil, and like an economics novel, economic theory, where the core tenet is no single human has the full knowledge to be able to, at a large scale, manufacture a pencil. Right. Because there are so many steps, there are so many parts at play in terms of that full supply chain, sourcing the raw material, designing the pencil, getting all the different raw materials combined at different stages. And it's just like a graphite pencil.
And it's one of the simplest inventions we have.
And look at everything we have now, like a mobile phone. I don't think anyone could even like fully plot the whole supply chain for a mobile phone. No,
impossible. I've heard of it as an interesting thought experiment. If if everyone on the planet remained with all of the knowledge we have right now, but all of our technology disappeared, all of our factories, mines, everything is gone, but we have all of the knowledge that we have today, how long would it take to produce a pencil?
Is it a question for me?
I mean, it's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah.
We have all the knowledge that we possess today, but all of our technology is gone.
Yeah, I mean, you need to build those bridges. You need to build those physical processes. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you know it from your own life. You can't just think of something in theory and suddenly it materializes. There are habits at play. There are like processes. There are relations between human beings and other human beings, between human beings and machinery.
Right.
Someone needs to get up in the morning and do something in order for A to pass to B, to pass to C, and then be combined with D. So you said to recreate everything.
Just a pencil.
Just a pencil.
Yeah. We have no technology.
I mean, if all of humanity are geared to recreate that process, it would be quite quick.
I doubt that it would be quick, even if we were geared to.
Yeah, I mean,
we need to feed ourselves.
Yeah.
So
there's no food.
We'd be fucked.
We'd start with food.
Yeah, we would start with tearing each other up. That's what I believe.
I think some regions in the world would suffer from starvation for quite a while because you need to start from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, we'd go back.
We'd be heavily overpopulated for a while.
All of our intelligence would mean nothing.
It wouldn't be nothing.
Nah.
I mean,
well, what am I gonna do with my podcasting and copywriting skills when we need to make food?
I mean, you would first.
I would become.
You would first
food.
need to manufacture a microphone.
I would become food. That's what I would be.
You would be what?
I would become food. That's what I would be.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe the first stage, like a zombie apocalypse
for sure.
setting.
For sure. The only people who would survive would be, the people who already lived that way, like the hunter-gatherers.
You think? Yeah, okay. I was thinking of the prepper movement.
Oh, no.
No, I think
I mean, they would survive for a while, but they would still need to get to hunter-gatherers to survive long-term.
Yeah, I think
become hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, it's the prepper movement.
Yeah.
When I was working at Lidl for a short period of time, I was like doing kind of an internship, planning promotions for the non-food. And me, or I think it was a colleague of mine who had the idea, we would try and source like prepper goods, because Lidl, they have like the non-food. You might be there to find an electric drill. Or like a microwave or a tent or whatever.
Completely random.
And we were like looking at the existing assortment, but also thinking of new products to source. We wouldn't be the ones sourcing it. It would be sourced by Germany. But then on the prepper theme. So we would want to try and sell this theme to the whole group kind of. We never followed through on it fully. I was just there for a few weeks, but it was a lot of fun. I did I haven't looked into prepper stuff before that.
Yeah.
But I kind of did an internal pitch to the team about the prepper movement.
Yeah.
And it also included some of this terminology that they use, like WSTF.
Okay.
When shit hits the fan.
Right. How long ago was this when you were pitching this?
It's like 5 years ago.
You were ahead of your time. That's why.
I think it was surging then.
If it was two or 3 years ago, they would have been like, let's do this.
Yeah, exactly. It was a bit too early.
Yeah.
I'm thinking why we looked at it back then, because it was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Something else must have happened.
Well, a lot of shit was happening
before COVID. Kind of wide.
ISIS was a big thing.
Yeah.
And I guess the war in Ukraine had already started with Crimea being taken over and the Donbass.
Yeah, I think it was
being in a war. So maybe something like that.
Part of that, like more.
It's so crazy to think about the time before, this war or before COVID.
Yeah.
It was a different planet, different world.
I have such a bad conception of time. For me, it feels like yesterday. Like,
oh yeah,
this time passes so fast for me.
The past few years?
when like the news flow about the conflict.
Oh, okay.
Because maybe I don't follow it as closely as you.
Right.
You probably have more of a clear timeline in your head.
Maybe. I don't know.
But then again, like some of these conflicts, the news flow, unless you're actively looking for that specific news flow, it kind of dissipates. The frequency of updates goes down because now there's a new conflict in town, and the human conscience in a certain part of the world is seemingly not large enough, not like able to absorb enough information that it can handle 2 or more conflicts at a time. So I feel like Ukraine, for example, I don't know what's been going on in the last few months.
I think we're recording this, what is it, November 15th? I think. No, wait, 20th? 21st? 20th. So, but this will be posted, I think, in January. So a lot of stuff might have happened until this is released. But basically, things are not going great in Ukraine. And I think that's why the Western media is not covering it as much in the past, let's say, 6 months. Because it's not a very rosy story. And
is it a stalemate, or is Russia actually...
Russia is advancing. And has been for a while.
I mean, I know last time I checked, they do have quite a clear control of significant areas, like even reaching a lot of the like Caspian Sea. Yeah, for sure. Like some of the most strategic ports, right? Yeah. That, I mean, what's the situation with Mariupol?
I think Mariupol has been down for a long time.
Okay. Yeah. That's how up to date I am.
Yeah. No, I mean, unless you're following a conflict closely, you're not going to get a full picture from just, casually watching the news. Or
sorry, I didn't mean Mariupol.
You mean Odessa?
Odessa, yeah.
Yeah, Odessa is still under Ukrainian control as of recording this, but we'll see. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess. And now with the presidential shift, a lot of stuff is happening. They just, as we're recording this, the U.S. just authorized long-range missiles for Ukraine to use long-range missiles into shooting into Russia. American missiles, and the Ukrainians just did that like 2 days ago.
Was that the first? Yeah. At least from Western information flow perspective, the first conceding that things are being fired onto Russian soil.
Things have been fired onto Russia before, but not this type of missile. Okay. Because these missiles require U.S. assistance. The Ukrainians cannot shoot these missiles on their own. They require U.S. GPS technology and stuff like that.
If you train them, you're being less of an active agent.
I mean, Russia sees this
it's such a gray area. NATO involvement. Why would it be less? Just because you're training, people.
It's all a mess.
Isn't it just as much involvement? Does it matter the nationality of the person pushing the trigger?
Technically, I guess it does. But yeah, I mean, there's a good case to be made that this has been a proxy war between the West and Russia since the beginning, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a never-ending proxy war with like other regions as well. The whole I mean, you could argue it stretches back to the Cold War, right?
Sure. I mean, this is kind of like we were talking about before. This is pretty much humanity's history.
Yeah.
It never really ends because there's never a perfect balance between superpowers. And there probably never will be. I mean, even if one superpower wins and it's a one world government, you're going to have breakout regions that are not happy with that, and and then it continues.
What's the name of this guy that, I mean, he's been really floating up in YouTube recommendations since the whole of the Ukraine crisis came up? This American political scientist, he has this theory of power.
John Mearsheimer?
Yeah. This guy.
A realist. Yeah. I like his analyses of things a lot. They're very grounded in reality and the geography and the manufacturing and all of this like hard stuff that you can't deny, pretty much.
Exactly. It's based on macro.
Yeah.
is not based on some weird theory
Propaganda.
about a dictator being a lunatic. Like,
yeah,
I mean, a dictator could be a lunatic, but unless there are other incentives at play, most often that lunacy there's a limit to that lunacy,
of course.
How much that can affect the whole world's situation.
Of course.
So it's stupid to listen to. I would personally say it's quite stupid to listen to and swallow some news flow about a leader being a lunatic and that being the main core reason why a conflict is proceeding. A single leader is not. If you replace that leader, if the dynamics are the same, you would still get the same situation in terms of the overall conflict.
It can change with different leadership, of course, but it's never as simple as one person took a decision and now we're at war. It's never that simple. Even in an autocracy, if the ultimate leader, dictator, whatever you want to call him, if they want to go on a suicide mission, the people around them, around the dictator, are going to react. It's never as simple as one person takes the decisions. There's a great book on this called The Dictator's Handbook, and it's all about how power works and power on every level, whether it's presidential or dictatorial or in your what is
your relationship?
Bostadsrättsförening. Okay. Whenever there's two or more people, there's power, and this book talks about the power dynamics. And even a dictator has to think about these things because they can be overthrown. Someone can murder them. Which happens all the time. I mean, Caesar got stabbed. That's how it goes.
Yeah, no matter how powerful you are in relation to others, there's always a negotiation at play.
Yes.
Even if the power dynamic is this unbalanced, there's always a negotiation.
Yeah.
You need to sustain your position in that negotiation. Otherwise, gradually, even if the dynamic is this, maybe even more if the dynamic is this, this is just a matter of time. Unless you negotiate, there's going to be an upsurge of someone from the other side feeling that imbalance, and that's going to have a backlash.
Of course. And you got to be sure to have the military on your side. As soon as they flip, you're done.
Exactly. Yeah. That's like we discussed before, the monopoly on violence. That's what it all boils down to in the end. And Mearsheimer is also all about that perspective. Like, if you have the biggest military, you could have a lot of other imbalances in your society, but if you have the biggest force, you can kind of veto what other people are saying, and even if they have some kind of moral high ground, if you would talk like moral theory about how people behave, it doesn't matter because you have the strength in the situation. You're able to put your foot down.
Yeah.
And I mean, we get into like forces of, in simple terms, good and evil. Like, to be good in society, you cannot just be fairy tale ponies and rainbows. You need to be strong enough to stand your ground when conflict arises, when forces of evil, when forces of disruption and destruction of things that you cherish come around. You need to be strong enough to stand your ground. You can't just be accepting. You can't just be embracing. And I think we see that in any movement. Like, of course, Dalai Lama has published books about boundaryless love, but I mean, he's a revolutionary leader as well. He has a movement of like people that want to get back land from an overlord in terms of the People's Republic of China. So no matter how peaceful you're trying to be on the inside, and like in many of your interactions in life, unless you have the ability to stand your ground, you might be stamped on.
For sure. We've lived in such a peaceful time in this part of the world the Western Europe and the United States or North America, that we have kind of started to believe that this is normal. But it's not. This is the exception. Like the amount of peace and prosperity that we have had here since World War II ended is incredible. Like this is compared to human history, this does not happen. It can happen temporarily within an empire, like say the Ottoman Empire. Within that empire, yeah, you had peace for hundreds of years and everything was fine from the average person's perspective.
Unless you were on the fringes of the empire.
Of course, yeah, that's what I'm saying, within the empire, when you're an insider. But to have this amount of peace and prosperity between different nations that we've had since World War II, it's incredible. It's really incredible. It's just unfortunate that we take it for granted because we believe that, we have believed that everything is fine. We're done having wars, but we're not, and we've lulled ourselves into some kind of comfortable level here, and we're shocked when something happens. Whereas other parts of the world, for instance, Russia, where people have vivid memories of their country being torn apart, Eastern Europe in general. Yugoslavia, where I'm from. In this part of the world, people are a little bit more grounded in reality because they've seen what war and suffering means. So they haven't gotten complacent in the same way that we have in the rich part of the world. I wish everyone could afford being complacent. That would be great because that's where we want to be. We want to live in a world without wars, but we don't. The reality is that it can happen and will happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's kind of what do you call it? A segue to. I brought this one because I got it home. Just
some people are just listening to the audio, so you'll have to describe it.
I showed it to the camera, but it's like a yellow pamphlet that's been sent out starting from Monday this week. By the Swedish authorities to any household in the Kingdom of Sweden. I think that's our official name, right? We're a kingdom.
Yeah, I guess we are.
Even though we just have a puppet ambassador, marketing manager kind of king.
Yeah.
But with this pamphlet, it says, in Swedish, it says, important information to citizens of Sweden. And then we have the emblem, the 3 crowns, which is the Swedish emblem. And then there's a big yellow pamphlet. It's quite sizable. I remember, I don't know how many years ago, but
the last one, it was a lot thinner.
4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, more than that.
And if I remember correctly, it was like 2 A4s folded or something. Yeah. But this guy, he has page numbering. It's 30 pages.
Shit's getting real, man.
And
we need to prepare.
The front page has an illustration of a female wearing a camouflage uniform with a Panzer helmet and a machine gun. Then behind her, there's a male pointing his machine gun towards something. There's an army boat. There's the Air Force flying by.
All right, we don't need to describe it in this much detail.
There's a small Swedish family there as well.
Let's get to the pamphlet.
But the title is If Crisis or War Comes.
Yes.
And then there's an introduction to the citizens of Sweden. We're living in onshore, unsafe times. There's a war. War is going on in our surroundings. Terrorism, cyber attacks, and false information, which might confuse. Misinformation is spread with the attempt to hurt and affect us. There's a lot of information here. I think, if I remember correctly, it's basically about that any citizen of Sweden needs to be on guard, that if crisis would come, you should be able to sustain yourself for at least a week.
Yeah.
That's like the gist of it.
Yeah, pretty much. So that prepping stuff at Little, could have had use of that now, huh?
Yeah, but that would just be a one-off campaign, so you would have to run for that
Have you started prepping?
I have to admit, I'm not a prepper.
Okay.
Have you?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, that
do you
kind
have
of stuff.
do you have like water?
Yes, I have water and like food that you could eat for a week in case something happens.
Yeah, I have a challenge with that because now my diet is so strict. I guess some of the canned food I would be able to buy. Like,
I mean, if we're in a situation of war, I assume you would just be eating whatever you need to eat.
I'd rather eat than starve, of course. but I mean, we could get to that topic because I am deliberately starving myself.
Yeah. Let's get back to your story.
It's not because of a national crisis, but it's because of a local crisis in my body, as we were talking about the whole cancer shebang.
Your personal war.
Yeah, exactly. So once, let's get back to, okay, enough with power dynamics.
We'll leave the war aside for now.
The power dynamics now is between, in this setting, I would say there are three main players to set the scene. There's Victor, like the healthy cells in Victor's body, and his brain, and that whole thing, like trying to assess the situation and how to handle the healthy part of Victor. Then there's the unhealthy, imbalanced part of Victor's body, which are currently the cancer cells. They're the worst of it, which have spread, as we said. And then the third player in the game, if I have to cut it short, it's the chemotherapy, because out of the treatments I'm getting, I'm also getting immunotherapy, but we don't need to get into that. Let's talk chemotherapy. It's the most aggressive one, and it's the most coarse one, the most unpolished. It has so many adverse effects and so many risks with it. So this triad of players, that's like setting the scene. Victor, the cancer cells, and chemotherapy. And when I was faced with the situation that, okay, I'm going to do chemo, as opposed to before, I was super worried about what the hell this was. But now I'm very happy to say that I got into this like war mentality. I stopped feeling any sense of like unfairness or like, oh, the universe is treating me unfairly for giving me this diagnosis because I feel like I've been living a relatively balanced, healthy life. No. The fact of the matter is I have an advanced cancer. So what can I do to deal with that situation? And one thing that I then took as a given based on the discussion with conventional healthcare was, okay, sooner or later, I'm going to get several rounds of chemotherapy. So then enter the chemotherapy player into the game. Okay. That's a very dangerous proposition to get chemotherapy. So how can I protect my body from chemotherapy whilst still dealing with this cancer thing? But even before that, I was thinking about how can I minimize the spread of cancer? Right. So the first thing I thought about when faced with, okay, I have cancer, was I thought about diet. And I was Googling and looking at scientific papers, and there was this clear theme that came up over and over again about cancer being skewed metabolically. So the way cancer gets its energy has a clear pattern where cancer cells differ from our normal cells. The way they use up energy, the way they metabolize energy has a clear direction towards using pure glucose. So as opposed to a normal cell, they could get any macronutrient like fatty acids, proteins, glucose molecules, and they could break them down quite dynamically. Like they have all of these. If you studied like biochemistry, you get to know these standard pathways of how to break down sugar or how to break down protein and fat.
Right.
And they're quite flexible in their metabolism. So your healthy cells, they can survive and thrive on a mix of those macros. But cancer cells have a clear skew, a clear tendency to prefer glucose. And the reason is they rely very heavily, most cancer cells, on not the cellular perspiration, so like using oxygen to break down the macros, but rather they use the lactation, so like the lactic fermentation. Sounds familiar to you. Is like how you brew beer or make wine. So you ferment the sugar, and it's much less efficient a process, which means those cancer cells, when they're geared towards that, they need a lot of glucose.
Okay.
So if you can restrict the glucose intake, if you can affect your glucose levels in your blood, so at least you don't get these big glucose spikes throughout the day because you're eating food that have very high levels of sugar that are easily dissolved into the blood. And that includes very starchy food as well, because starch is just a long chain of glucose molecules with just a small link between them. So they basically start breaking down into pure glucose already in your mouth with your saliva.
Would that include potatoes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Potatoes, flour, like pasta.
So anything with carbs, really?
No, if you have a carby food that has a lower carb content and the higher carbs is actually a misnomer, because we say carbs, right? But fiber is also a type of carb. So what you would look for is sugar and starches. If there's a high concentration of sugar and starches, that would increase your blood sugar. Whereas if there's high concentration of fiber, which is also a type of carbohydrate,
right,
it wouldn't. But I think if you look at the nutritional information of any food, like the standard listing of macros, I think fiber is not part of the number you get for carbohydrates.
No, it's separate.
But it is an actual carbohydrate. It's not really digested by our digestive system the same way.
Right.
So when looking at carbs, the way we talk about carbs, you should go for carbs that have a high fiber content,
right,
a lower sugar and starch content. And that thing was like, this tendency of cancer cells, it was discovered over 100 years ago, like around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. There's this German researcher, Otto Warburg, and he discovered this tendency in cancer cells, that they need a lot of sugar. They're very sugar dependent. They're using this fermentation.
Right.
He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize in Biology, 1930s somewhere. Since then, I think medicine has tried to use this perspective to find drugs. So they've tried to find drugs that can affect this metabolism in cancer cells, but for some reason it hasn't really latched on to how this could mean recommending different lifestyle changes to different people. As we all know, the food industry and the way we lead our lives in terms of consuming food has moved the other direction, where we're just eating more and more refined carbs,
right,
and ultra processed carbs, where we're like at the point where a lot of people start to eat just food in powder form. So the more you just hack down the macros into their smallest constituencies, which is glucose, the more you're gonna have spikes in blood glucose. And I think the pattern is quite clear that could increase the chance of cancer spreading or becoming more aggressive. So what I did in terms of diet was I switched to a very ketogenic diet.
And that means?
That means, as opposed to the standard Western diet, which, at least in the US, I think these, we'll get to them later. What's the name of that couple? The siblings?
Callie and Casey Means.
Yeah, so they mentioned some statistic in a pod I listened that, at least in the US, the ratio of carbs to the total macros that people consume, it's like 70%.
Damn.
So I want to stay at the ketogenic diet level, which means my North Star is to have like 80 to 85% fats, 10 to 15% protein, and 5 to 10% carbs.
Okay.
But now I've started to do strength training quite a lot, which means I've upped my protein. So I'm probably more around 70, 20, 10. But that's still quite a stark contrast to the average Western diet.
Yeah.
And you see it in the supermarkets. You don't see healthy fats in the shelves. You don't see as much healthy proteins in the shelves. You see a lot of carbs. You see a lot of pre-processed, like aggressively processed carbs in most of the shelves in the supermarket. And especially if you look at the shelf size of that, like in terms of number of products, it might be a bit less, but if you just look at the shelf space that these shitty products take up in a supermarket is quite telling. And when I switched my diet, that was the first time I really noticed that walking into a supermarket. It felt like an outer body experience, because I was so convinced in my head that I need to switch my diet due to health reasons, and not just because I'm sick. I was convinced if I had known this beforehand, I would still be switching just as aggressively. And then you go into a supermarket and okay, in the beginning you're met with fruit and veg often, so that's like, I mean,
that's actual food.
Some of that fruit and veg is less than ideal because it's been too processed. It's been too
manipulated.
Yeah, it's been driven up to maximize output in terms of weight rather than nutrition. So like tomatoes is a good example. They're just less nutritious than they could be.
Yeah.
And if you buy shitty tomatoes, it's just buying expensive water, basically. So why do that? And that's a side note. Like if you think about the quality of your fresh produce, like what you're actually getting in terms of nutrition, very often it would make just as much sense to buy better quality, because you're not getting nutrition just because you're getting a weight. So your shopping bag feels heavy, but you don't get the nutrition. It's just water. And like meat is sometimes laced with water and salt solution and this kind of shit. So for example, now I'm buying better minced meat, and one of these so in Sweden it's good. It's increased in the last few years that you have more and more e-commerce platforms or shops where you can buy
straight
for
from
home
the farm,
delivery straight from the farm. There's like a middleman, but they just do the logistics basically.
Yeah, I've started looking into that stuff. So you do that.
I can give you a few tips.
Yeah, for sure.
Or if you see in my Instagram feed, there's already some tips, but I can give you a list.
It costs a little bit extra, but it's better quality.
Yeah,
generally it seems like.
Definitely. Yeah. And you can sometimes get cuts that you wouldn't be getting as easily as well.
Right.
Like we could get into that later. For the first time now, I've been propagandized by a friend of mine to eat more organ meats. Like
they're supposed to be very good for you.
It's very nutritious.
Yeah.
Obviously, especially me, like my gut is bombarded by chemo and stuff, so I need to be a bit careful with how much I put in of things that are super nutritious and such. But I have a friend, he's very much into that. He's like spread it throughout his family. So he's small kids, like he was feeding his newborn baby, basically a few months old. He was feeding that baby blood the other day.
Oh Jesus!
Like just a small taste from the finger, but he was claiming that baby got crazy about the blood. Like,
oh yeah,
she loved the blood. So
all right,
there's something to it. I mean, some indigenous.
Shout out to your friend's vampire kid.
Yeah, I'll name him. He deserves
no,
credit.
Don't do it.
I think he'll be happy with it.
No, don't do it. You can't say someone is feeding their baby blood on the internet and then name the person.
Okay, you know you are.
People are not going to take that as a positive.
I think. It's a 50-50. I won't be outing him.
Don't.
But that was just a taster. But, no, he has some good input. I did order now. It's coming tomorrow.
Nice.
A big batch of organ meat. frozen, obviously, because I'm gonna eat it like small portions at a time. But I did order quite a range,
Nice.
and I focused on lamb and beef. I was thinking about game, like wild game, but I think because my gut is getting a lot of bombardment from chemo, and the reason my gut is, I said it before, the gut lining is the one dividing the fastest. So even if I'm protecting myself, which we'll get to with the fasting, there will be some impact on my gut. So I'm trying to be a bit aware of, like, for example, wild game has a higher risk of having parasites. So I'd rather focus on lamb and beef because it's more controlled how they're fed, how they're grazing, and then I'll stay away from the organs of chicken and pork because they get more like they're driven up more aggressively, so their organs might not be as healthy. It's better to go with the grazing animals, I think.
So beef, lamb, and also organs from beef and or cow and lamb.
Yeah, I mean, I eat chicken meat and I eat fish. But in terms of organs, because the organs, some of them can accumulate toxins quite a lot. So so I ordered for lamb, and for beef I ordered heart, liver, kidney. I think that was about it.
Delicious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind. Like when I was living in London, my closest supermarket was a Turkish one. It was called TFC, Turkish food chain. It's like a London chain. No, it's a supermarket. But in their butcher section, they always had lamb heart, for example. So I cooked it a couple of times.
It's very common around the world. It's just in this like part of the world where we're disinfecting. We just want everything to be clean and
I think it's on the similar line as like us being so conflict free and like having such a steady supply chain, so we can start disinfecting everything and just not needing to see that what we're eating is an actual animal. Like even if you go to other places in Europe, still many places you are able to see the heads of the animals in the supermarket. You
go to the butcher to get your meat, not a supermarket where it's finally packaged.
You go to the butcher or you go to even in the supermarket, like in many countries, you do see the heads still. But in Sweden, I don't know when that disappeared.
I don't know, man. But we have a whole weird thing with in the West in general with like gag laws that you can't even like record how these meat processing industries operate.
Did you say gag laws?
Yeah. Add gag laws.
You mean like, so people won't get a gag reflex?
No. So like the suppressing like information about the meat industry.
So you gag.
Yes.
I thought it was
kind of gag.
I thought it was anti-gag, like people would be gagging, getting a gag reflex if they saw the heads. It was like
I'm sure a lot of people would. Yeah.
Nowadays, they're just neutered. We're neutered in terms of seeing wildlife.
Well, that's one of the.
We just see it in the zoo or on TV.
Yeah, it's one of the beautiful things and also downsides of being so rich and peaceful as we've been. Like we can Disneyfy everything. We can make everything so nice and neat and suit us perfect.
Disneyfy is the right word for like our relation to animals.
Yeah,
because
then
what we do is we Disneyfy it in terms of any wild animals we're exposed to at a young age in a Disney movie. Like the first time most people in our part of the world sees wild animals is in a Disney movie.
For sure.
And then you have the other part of it. You have pets, which are Disneyfied living species. Like breeding dogs is all about Disneyfication. It's just the smaller and cuter a dog could be, the better for
so
a lot
adorable.
of people in our part of the world.
They're so cute.
I mean, on the daily, you see people carrying their dogs when they're in a shop. Like, what is that?
It's not a wolf.
For me, it's just weird.
It's definitely not a wolf.
I got a Netflix...
Purse dogs.
I got a Netflix ad. I think I don't remember maybe it was British. The name of the series was Dog Man.
Okay.
I just watched the trailer for like 15 seconds. But in terms of dogs and wolves, I think he was like a mafia guy, like a dealer or whatever, and or maybe he was a hitman.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he made hits was using a lot of stray dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So he trained the dogs.
Damn.
To be hitmen.
Damn.
So there was this in the
That
intro,
is
like
hardcore.
15-second intro. There was this guy who done something wrong. Supposedly, he was walking around the streets, and the dog man, he had instructed one of his dogs to follow this guy,
right?
To just plot and plan for him being his prey.
Damn.
So you saw like the dog following him in the streets, and then there was another dog as well. So there was like there was a flock thing going on as well, which was so much in line with wolves.
This is straight out of a Guy Ritchie movie.
Yeah, but I think there are other examples. Like I think in Goa, in Kerala, in India,
right
on the beach there. I don't know how it is now, but a few years ago, I heard they have like a pack of wild dogs, like not wild dogs like the African wild dog, but like stray dogs,
right?
That have turned into a flock of stray dogs, and they're behaving like wolves.
Yeah.
So they're like hunting people.
I saw those in the Philippines when I was there. This was quite a while ago. But you would see these packs of stray dogs just marching the streets during night. And I never got into any trouble with them, but I can imagine that it would suck if you get on their bad side.
I mean, they're getting back to their roots.
Yeah, I guess.
It's like an uprising.
Yeah.
It's the uprising of the handbag dogs.
Yeah.
Imagine if you had the handbag-sized dogs being stray dogs. That would be like an army of rats.
They would get eaten by any bird. Then away.
Then you get into this interesting, which I think has been discussed in several podcasts, but it's most probably been discussed in like Joe Rogan.
Okay.
If you have to face a group of animals,
right?
Like which would be your enemy of choice? Where the alternatives are like, if you have to choose or I think there's even an extension of it. It's like you have to fight two of these, and you can pick two of these
to be on your side.
Yeah, to be on your side, and there's like a certain number of each animal.
Okay.
So it could be like 1 grizzly bear, 3 gorillas,
right?
1,000 rats,
right.
15 eagles.
Yeah. It's an interesting debate.
So how many handbag dogs would you need?
You would need a lot of them. Yeah.
I think the only thing they're good for, apart from looking cute, if they're to protect you, it would be like they're barking.
Yeah, they're
louder.
Noisy. Yeah.
Something about like smaller dogs, they bark more.
Yeah, they can be annoying. So meat. You eat a lot of meat now, and veggies.
Can I use the restroom?
Yeah, let's take a quick break.
Cool.
All right, we're back.
Okay, cool.
Let's get to the topic of fasting, since we teased it a couple of times. You can't pull it that way.
Yeah.
It'll break off. You're too strong.
Yeah,
man.
I mean, before we go to fasting, let's talk a little bit about fats.
Okay.
I mean, that's also an interesting thing.
Fats.
Fat. Still nowadays, people demonize fat.
Yeah, but less and less it feels
less
like.
and less, but still people our age, I hear, oh, fat is supposed to be bad. Like I was talking to a couple of Japanese friends over a video call, and I was explaining my diet, and they were so shocked. They were like, my doctor says I can't eat fat. And same with the healthcare system in Sweden.
Really?
What I was given when I was given this diagnosis, I met a dietitian,
right?
Who's part of the standard Swedish healthcare system. I was given 2 pamphlets. I wish I had them with me. I trashed them, but I'm going to find 2 new copies because they were bizarre.
Really?
When you're given a cancer diagnosis in Sweden and you're going to be exposed to aggressive treatment, one of the things they are most afraid of is you losing weight.
Right.
And I mean, it has some legitimate concern in some cases because there is something called cachexia, which is a state a person could be experiencing if they're very weak, if their overall body composure is very weak and they're not eating enough during treatment, and the combination of aggressive treatment and cancer could kind of over time lead into a downward spiral where your body at some certain point would start giving up, and it would not be able to, it would stop processing nutrients basically, and it would just start some self-starvation mode.
Right.
But a person my age, my general health, would never end up in that situation. Still, no matter who you are when you get the diagnosis, you're going to get this general advice. It's super important not to lose weight.
Right.
And this is what you do not to lose weight. You eat anything you feel like. And here is a list of recommendations, what you can eat. So in the 2 pamphlets, I got like 100 options. I counted and I ticked off all of those options. And I counted like more than 90% of the options were just shit. In terms of the perspective I was given before with sugar and glucose.
Right.
So it was literally like vanilla ice cream, caramel sauce, strawberry sauce, this kind of risifrutti, which is like a very sweetened rice pudding snack with jam to it, super white bread, super processed this and that. So this was the recommendation you're getting in terms of diet.
All of that stuff would feed the cancer, as you were talking about.
Yeah,
earlier.
it's very clear.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard to controlledly measure that in a human study because it's hard to follow up diet over a long period of time with human studies. Yeah. You would have to pay for that diet. You would have to control that these people only eat that, because if you let them go home, they're gonna snack. So it's very hard to control for. But in terms of animal studies, the pattern is very clear.
How did they explain this to you? Like, how come? I mean, they obviously have to know about the glucose thing as well.
No, many of them don't.
Really?
I think it's a wider problem. It's like, you could talk about the incentives why this is not becoming prominent in the healthcare system. Like, and there, at least how it works in Sweden, is nothing is becoming prominent in terms of treatment options and recommendations in the healthcare system unless it's included in the standard healthcare plan for a certain diagnosis.
Right.
So for every given diagnosis, there is a booklet. There's a Bible in Sweden, and in that Bible should hold everything, basically, that you're expected to follow as guidelines if you have a patient, if you're a doctor, specialist or generalist, and you have a patient with that diagnosis. And as opposed to in some countries, I think like in the US, there are more degrees of freedom. So a certain clinic could have a different approach.
Right.
But in Sweden, it's very standardized.
Got it.
And I mean, in my booklet for my diagnosis, there's nothing about diet. It's non-existent. So it's not even a perspective they take in, basically.
Yeah. I have the same experience.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy when you have such a clear pattern of many of these lethal and serious diseases having an epidemiology where it's clear that lifestyle factors do play in heavily into what we see as a clear trend in Western society, that many of these are on the rise. And it's not just because we're getting older, it's also because they're rising for people at younger ages. And it's so clear, like the siblings we were talking about before,
Callie and Casey
Means, they've done a wider survey of this in the US specifically, but the US pattern for some of these diseases might be more clear and drastic, but the same pattern is seen all throughout Western world, where you have these chronic diseases rising in numbers and getting lower and lower in age. Another typical example is like diabetes in the US, where pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes is existing in 50% of the US population.
Yeah, crazy.
I was about to look up the number in Sweden, but I don't know, but it's probably not nearly as high, but it's most probably showing the same trend, because we've been following the same direction in terms of changing our eating habits and our living habits as the US in general terms. So, and then you have the whole thing about the connection between healthcare and lobbying from the food industry, but also lobbying from pharma.
Of course.
Where obviously pharma wants you to be medicated because
Money.
they're all about medication, medicating people. They're not about like pharma. As any business, you want recurring revenue. You want to have returning customers. So if you're producing pharmaceuticals, you would want to have returning customers for those pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
It's much more profitable than giving lifestyle advice and then having someone change their lifestyle and suddenly having a significantly lower risk of carrying a disease.
Or even providing a pharmaceutical, but that you take once and the problem is solved. Which of course is not possible
but I think
in a lot of cases, but even if it was, the incentive structure would be, no, let's go the other way.
Sure, but then I think, I mean, me having, I would say, enough background in terms of knowledge of biology and biochemistry, I would say that's more going down the paranoid route. Like
not necessarily.
Not necessarily for all health conditions.
You mentioned pre-diabetes, for instance.
Yeah.
You can't treat pre-diabetes to not develop actual diabetes. And the insurance companies in the US do not reimburse that type of medication. Whereas once you do have diabetes, you're on treatment for the rest of your life, and the insurance companies reimburse that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one pill to fix it, but the kind of medications that would that are shorter range, let's say, the incentive structure is against them, which is very unfortunate. Which doesn't have to mean that it's always the case and that these guys want you to suffer. It's not the case at all. But the incentive structure will push the decision makers in that direction every now and then. Sure,
but I would want to take it even a step further and say, okay, it's not like pre-diabetes medication is not included in the insurance coverage. But if you could suggest a lifestyle adjustment, that's even less. That's even less of an intervention, and that's even less likely to be included in the insurance coverage. So I think it's a problem of incentives.
Absolutely.
But then it's also a problem of human psychology. Like I think US has taken it to its extreme, where the psychology of humans to want to have a quick and easy solution for problems like health problems has gone to the extreme that in the mind of an average American citizen, I'm freeballing here, but I would guess in many cases when they're facing an health issue, the first thing that comes to mind in their brain is, okay, what drug should I take? Which specialist should I see?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's like decades of propaganda that has formed.
Yeah, but propaganda thrives on our basal instincts.
Sure.
Propaganda doesn't work if it goes 100% against our nature. So like
every now and then it seems to, though.
No, it's still part of our nature.
I guess.
We create a sick society because we're sick species.
Yeah, fair enough.
We're very adaptable, which is both our strength and our weakness.
Maybe not against our nature, but against our natural instincts. It seems like a lot of propaganda, sometimes it's just like crazy.
I mean, then you come into what's natural. Like,
sure.
I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy, but then, of course, there is a pattern. Like, we're doing things in a way which we weren't biologically evolved to do in many senses. Like, you could talk about nature and the environment, like the environment we're living in.
Yeah.
You could, it's a play of words, but you could say it's unnatural for us because if you define natural as what we're evolutionarily developed to be surrounded by, our organism hasn't been developed to live in the type of environment we're living in right now. Our organism was developing across so many generations, and I mean anything with evolution, you could also always stretch back the lineage of species that came before there was a human being. So literally all the way down to single cellular organisms. And throughout that whole chain of events, our biology has, until very recently, not come across an environment that is like the one we're living in now. This environment is alien to our biological mechanisms in a big sense. And food is one such thing. But just like our surroundings. If you're living in a city, how often do you gaze at the horizon? How often do you trace your path
Right.
to get to a distant destination from which you have to get to another distant destination?
Yeah.
No, you're just like back and forth a few hundred meters, maybe a kilometer, commuting.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even using your feet most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
You're like putting yourself in a shuttle that's going to take you from point A to B. So all of these basal elements, these core components of being a human being, are being thwarted. We're losing grip on many of these instincts, and I think it's part of the reason why our health is suffering as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's a package.
It is absolutely
it's like,
part of it.
If you look at a nature documentary,
Yeah.
How come the butterfly is attracted to that flower? How come that flower is perfectly placed and like formed to be in such a nice unison with the snout or whatever they call it from the butterfly. So it just about reaches, and then it just about touches, and then just about spreads. There's so much in nature which has this synergy on so many levels, and we're removing a lot of that synergy by the way we shape our environment.
Sure.
And it must have some effect on our organism, and that's what we're seeing. And then we're also introducing a lot of stressors that didn't used to exist.
Yeah. No, we're a strange species, man.
Yeah.
Very strange. But let's get back to the diet, and we were on fat. You were talking about
fat. So I went on this whole tangent about, what was it, fat and
the sugary food that they recommend at the treatment.
Exactly. So let's just conclude that the healthcare system in Sweden, at least, they don't know 2 cents about diet, or the system is not geared to recommend anything diet-wise.
Doctors study for 5.5 years here. That's like the standard program, and they study diet for 12.5 hours.
Yeah,
of
and
those 5.5 years.
Something similar in the US, right?
It's crazy.
And the Casey siblings said something
you should
similar.
not ask a doctor about diet.
But even dietitians, like I was talking to a professional dietitian. I was more of a specialist than he was. I mean, really? Most definitely. I don't know what he's
I'm sure that's bad luck. There's got to be
maybe there are good ones, but I asked Karolinska, where I'm at, is there any specialist in Karolinska who's has any focus on caloric restriction, which we'll get to, like fasting? And there was no one, not a single soul. So I mean, it's backwarders.
Yeah, got it.
I think it's the whole thing. Like, people become specialists, and then, I mean, to be blunt, medicine is not studied in the way basic science is studied. Like if you're studying basic science, you're starting from core principles, and then you're building out from that, often with some math behind it. Whereas medicine, in my view, it seems to be studied both that you over-specialize, so you don't look at the whole, you look at the parts. But then again, even when looking at a specific part, you're kind of building a decision tree, an algorithm in your head, because you're going to become a treating physician. So you're going to be faced with all of these patients, and you have to make these judgment calls. And sometimes it's a time crunch. So the way to optimize for that in the system currently is you create these decision trees. And a physician risks becoming an executor of decision trees, rather than being analytical and flexible and looking at the newest and latest science on this field, because so much is happening. But there's such a delay often in any given practitioner in the healthcare system adapting to that. And that's also related to the like national healthcare plans and stuff. But it already starts at the individual practitioner level, where I think already in the school bench, they're kind of trained to become executors of decision trees and algorithms rather than looking at things holistically.
No, it's a very difficult thing to keep up with medical research, and even more difficult thing to adjust the education to the latest medical research, because it takes takes a while to create a program to for students. It takes a while. It's a process, and it's never. Same with any kind of education. If you're gonna, you remember when your teachers were teaching you about computers, and you're like, Jesus, I'm way ahead of you guys, because
your computers are old.
Yeah, because
Why do you have this crap?
They are until you get something onto the school decision tree, whatever, and then it gets through, and then you start testing it and then implementing it. By that time, the kid's already on TikTok.
I also think it's one of the limitations of standardization.
Yeah,
and standardization is often comes about to try and increase the lowest acceptable level of something in terms of quality. But what you risk getting at is you're cutting everything by the ankles, so you're not getting the bright, innovative stuff either. Yeah,
but it's a trade-off, because if you go too far in the other direction, you will get false information, studies that have not been verified enough and stuff like that, if you're too quick to jump on innovation. So it's a very difficult balance to figure out how education should work.
But then you could argue, like, if someone is suffering from quite a lethal diagnosis, shouldn't you increase the degree of freedom for that individual to affect his situation, his or her situation? And in Sweden, that's not the case. Like, Swedish healthcare is very defensive. I was very quickly identifying that, and I was also talking to a friend of mine who's working on clinical trials globally, that the Swedish healthcare system is not geared towards innovative treatments. It's always lagging behind. It's very seldom that Swedish healthcare is joining clinical trials at an early stage and such, where it's not because it's not possible. It's just because the system is geared to be very defensive and very standardized. So, and I mean, we could talk about education there as well. Like, I have big issues with standardized education. I think it's shit. I think it's wasting so much human potential. And I think most of what's going on in standardized, regimented education is just about keeping kids in a place so they don't bother the parents, because they need to go and work and pay taxes. But in terms of productivity, in terms of enabling humans to flourish, it's very much counterproductive.
No, for sure. But but it's tricky either way.
But let's get back to fats.
Yes.
So before we talk about fasting, let's talk a bit more about fats. So I said ketogenic, so a high degree of fats, and that's because fat metabolism is the furthest away from the pure glucose metabolism. A cancer cell could more easily utilize proteins to break them down than it could fats.
Okay.
So that's one of the bulk of it. And also, like, blood glucose wouldn't be going up as quickly with fats. So you can measure that in the blood as well. You can measure the blood glucose, which any person with diabetes is doing. They used to be doing it with prick tests, but now there are also these continuous glucose monitors.
Right. The little machine
I'm using
put on
mine
your arm
for the first time here. So if you have it looking like this, for those without camera, it's on my upper arm. You just prick your upper arm, like your triceps area, with a needle, and it sticks there, and then the sensor is active for 14 days. And it's gonna give you readouts. The one I bought, it's imported from China. I think it's probably the best brand. It's can I name the brand?
Why not?
Yeah, it's called Psy Bionics, so SI Bionics.
I'm not SVT.
So I'm happy with it. I just started using it, and it's giving me interesting information. And that one is feeding me every 5 minutes with a reading. So it has a real time, whereas I think the American version, I forgot the name of the brand, Libre or something, you need to actively ask it. So it's not going to give you a 5 minute, every 5 minutes reading. And it gives you some insights on the blood glucose. But similarly, you can also measure the fat in your blood.
Mm-hmm.
And like the smallest metabolite of fat is the ketones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a small molecule with a few carbons, an oxygen, something like that. So you can measure the ketone level. So similarly, you can get a monitor that you put on your arm for ketones, which I'm going to do next. And,
Got it.
and there you would also see, okay, if you have ketones in your blood, that means your cells are able to digest fat instead of glucose.
Mm-hmm.
And the more ketones you have in general, the less you would have the glucose spikes, which is a good thing in general.
Yeah.
But in terms of the type of fat, it's also interesting. You have, there's this thing about you shouldn't eat too much certain types of fats. There's like the trans fats, which are, they accumulate more in your body. They
Mm-hmm.
could accumulate in fat, and they could over time become cancerogenous or inflammatory. So you want to think about what type of fat you put in.
Yep.
You want to have less processed fat in general,
Mm-hmm.
whether animal or plant-based fat. You don't want it to be overly processed, because that's often when it's like heated and pressurized, you get these less natural fatty acids, which the body can handle less well. And then there's also the aspect of omega fats, which you've heard about. Like you have the supplements
Fish
of
oil.
omega-3, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most plant or animal fats, they have omega fats, and the more they're processed, the more they tend to have omega-6. So there's always a ratio between omega-6 and omega-3.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also about, for example, with animal fats, how those animals were fed.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're fed with more processed grains, the meat would turn out having a higher omega-6.
Okay.
So for example, beef that is grass-fed, it's going to have higher omega-3 content. So you would preferably eat that beef, because you want to have an even balance. You want to have like I don't remember the ideal ratio, but it's somewhere between 1:1 and 1:3
Mm-hmm.
between omega-3 and omega-6. But in some oils, especially seed oils, like from very heavily processed seed oils, omega-6 would just be up through the roof. It would be like 15:1.
Mm-hmm.
And you need that. You need to find the good balance between the omega acids, because if there's too much omega-6, it's going to cause a lot of inflammation in your body.
Right.
And that's another aspect. If you have a lot of inflammation inducing stuff in your body, you're increasing the risk of cancer cells thriving.
Got it.
Because cancer cells live on inflammation and creating acidic environments and this kind of thing.
Right.
But that's enough about fats, I think.
Let's get to fasting.
Yeah. So the first thing I identified was the diet, and I switched my diet straight away, like as soon as I suspected I had cancer. And then I was faced with the fact that I was getting chemo.
Mm-hmm.
So chemo is going to hurt my body, my healthy cells, especially the ones that are dividing fast, which a central one is my gut.
Mm-hmm.
And I was Googling and I was looking at articles, and I was also reasoning about, okay, how can I protect my gut? If chemo is acting on fast dividing cells, can I in some way make those gut cells divide more slowly?
Right.
And I came onto the topic of fasting.
Mm.
And it was very clear that what's happening when you're fasting, based on experiments, is your body goes into this protective state and this cleanup state. It's like defragmenting your hard drive. It's like just taking time out to recover. So when you're fasting, your stomach acid goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Your immune cells, because 90% of your immune cells are in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
So your immune cells, but also your gut lining, is going into self-repair mode and like cleaning mode.
Right.
So a lot of the cells that are getting old and damaged, they will be renewed, they will be recycled. But also the cells that are usually very active, dividing and digesting food, they will get into a more dormant state where they're kind of protecting themselves.
Right.
And then you get the chemo in. So if you're able to induce this protective state before you get the chemo in, you're going to have less of a deleterious, less of a damaging effect from the chemotherapy, from the cellular poison, because those cells are no longer as available to get poisoned.
Okay.
They're not dividing as fast. And it has the benefits of protecting your gut, but also protecting your immune defense and your immune cells. And I was reading up about this, and then I was just about to start my first treatment. But I've never fasted. Like, I've never deliberately said to myself, I'm not going to eat for a full day.
Right.
And now I was thinking about doing this for multiple days because my treatment, my chemo and the immune therapy I'm getting, it's kind of spread over 2.5 days. So I would obviously need to protect myself throughout those 2.5 days. But then again, I need to get down to that state before starting treatment. So I need some kind of window before.
Right.
And then even if you stop getting infused with the cellular poison here, after those 2.5 days, that chemical, that substance will still be in your blood for some time. It's going to have a half time where with every half time you get half the concentration of that in your blood until there's less and less, almost nothing left.
Right.
So I require a window after that as well. So I was very tentative to get on the bandwagon and start fasting because I didn't know what would happen to my body. So what I did was first, I didn't go all in. Instead I found this, there's this American researcher who's originally from Italy. His name is Victor Salander. He's one of the most prominent researchers in fasting science. He's at some university on the West Coast. And he's been studying longevity connected to fasting, but also cancer treatment. And he started with animal studies and like studies in small cell cultures. And with animal studies, he saw such a clear pattern that animals that were fasting, that were not given continuous food,
right,
rationing, they, not only when they were implanted with human cancer cells, did that cancer tumor grow slower, but also when they were getting cancer, but they were also getting chemotherapy, the efficiency of that chemotherapy was higher, and they didn't get as much damage from the chemo itself. And then I think what happened then was he was to translate it to humans, but it's harder to lobby for finding a big enough group of human patients and telling them, okay, could you try and not eat at all for a number of days? Because as I said before, like in many healthcare systems, you're given the opposite advice.
Right.
You're like, you're never supposed to lose weight unless you really have to. You have to eat a lot. So what he did instead was he introduced something he called the fast mimicking diet, which is like a light version of fasting. So water fasting, it means you're only drinking water. You're not getting any calories.
Right.
You could be like maybe some herbal tea, but nothing that has calories. And what he did instead was he went on a very low calorie diet for a number of days around the treatment. So his protocol is somewhere between 400 and 800 calories for each day. And then he sold it as a package deal kind of. So there's a standardized, he even sells like bundles of nutrients that you could just buy. Then you go with the day 1 pack and then the day 2, 3, 4.
Right.
So my first cycle, my first treatment, I went with his approach. So I went down to like 500 to 1,000 calories. But I noticed a lot of issues with my gut. I felt like my gut was dying on me, like these cells were crying out. I had a lot of issues with like, the issues you can imagine you get with the gut, like diarrhea and constipation and just disgusting stuff. and also puking a lot during the first treatment. So then I decided, what do I have to lose? I'll just try to go full on fasting. And then the next cycle I did a 4.5 day water fasting. And it felt much better.
4.5 days.
4.5 days, yeah. So before maybe I'd done one day without planning it, but this was 4.5 days cold turkey. I think it's easier to start doing it if you've gone to a ketogenic diet. So if anyone is planning to do water fasting, don't go from 100 to 0 in terms of having eaten like a lot of French fries and pasta and ice cream, and then suddenly from one day to the next you're going to do 100% water fasting. No, think about your blood glucose levels before going into water fasting. I always tell people now, because I think there are many examples of people having a hard time doing water fasting, and I think that's the main reason.
Makes sense.
The second challenge with water fasting is, of course, to break the fast. Because during the fast, even when I was getting chemo, I felt quite okay. Of course, the first days of chemo, you're poisoned, so your body's dying on you still. But then I felt protected, and of course, in the beginning, you're not used to it, so you feel like your body needs food. But after a few days, like day 2 already, in my case, most times, but at least day 3, 4. And then 5, 6 when I've extended the fast, you don't feel as hungry and like, obviously you're not going to go run a marathon anytime soon, but you can kind of go on with your day, especially if you're not on chemo. Like I have friends, the same friend, he's been doing a week-long fast just now. But I mean, you don't need to do it for that long. There are clear health benefits to just doing a 2-day or a 3-day water fast. And some of the proponents of fasting, they even claim that most people should consider doing a 2 or 3 day fast several times a year. And I would also say I'm in that camp, without having like decided on the exact protocol. I think everyone would need to think about what fits them.
When you said you felt protected, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I mean, I mean it in terms that I didn't experience at all the same symptoms
from the chemo.
From the chemo, yeah. So I didn't have nearly as much issues with like gut symptoms.
And the difference was just
and
the
also
fasting.
also like mental symptoms that come from having gut issues.
Of course.
So I could sleep more regularly and all of that, and that's crucial when you're getting aggressive treatment, like chemo. Or when you're getting any stress to your body, you need to be able to try and get as much sleep as possible, because that's when your body is healing and repairing, and that's when your immune system really kicks in and can start strengthening you. And then cycle 3 came along, and since I still had some issues, I decided, and I reasoned that I need to extend it even further. So then I ended up with the protocol I'm currently sticking to, which is 5.5 days of water fasting. And that means, and I reasoned I can't go any further because I don't have much body fat on me, so I can't just starve myself for too long, then I'll turn into a corpse. So what it means is I have a pre-treatment window of 36 hours, so 1.5 days. Which I reasoned I need at least 1.5 days. People often say you need 2 to really get down into the fasting state that is protecting or healing or repairing or cleaning. And then I have the 2.5 days during. And then I've also reasoned, based on the half-life of the drugs I'm getting, that I need at least another 1.5 days to be on the safe side. So that's like 3 days around and 2.5 days during, so 5.5 days. And after those 5.5 days, it's time for
McDonald's
feasting. Not McDonald's, no more McDonald's for me. And feasting needs to be gradual. Like if you Google fast breaking and long-term fast, you're gonna see some protocols about what to think about. And one of those things is do not introduce too calorie dense things all at once. You need to be a bit more gradual about it. And also my gut has been stressed by the chemo, so I might need to be even more careful. But what I noticed after failing a bit a few times now, I'm on my 5th cycle, so I've had 3 cycles of this 5.5 day thing. Is my gut is so turned off that in the beginning, even if I wait, I like the standard protocol. If you're just doing a long-term water fast, but you're not on any other treatment, is usually that you start with like some liquid food, like a broth, like a chicken broth or a vegetable stock. And then you slowly, like you take that, you sip that for half an hour or more, and you feel it out. And then you can gradually start introducing like fibrous vegetables, but very, very strongly cooked. So the fibers are broken down. And then gradually you could think about introducing like some fermented foods to help your gut. But there I saw a challenge for me. I actually have to wait with fermented foods now, I feel.
Okay.
I always have fermented foods once I've gotten my gut going. That's like, if you look at my Instagram, you're going to see a lot of fermented foods. So either it's like kefir, like the sour milk with bacteria, or it's the sauerkraut, kimchi, this type of thing. Usually both. But in the beginning, that might be sensitive. And then after you get that in, you can go for the proteins and the fats. But just have a bit of time in between. However, what I noticed was my gut was so turned off that I couldn't break down the fats and the proteins. And during cycle 4, I was eating, but things just came out the other end. Like I was eating a leaf of coriander, and the same leaf of coriander came out. I was eating like a piece of eggplant, aubergine, and the same thing came out. So that was really scary, and that carried on for 3 days.
Damn.
And what I realized, I went in panic to a health nutrition store that sells like supplements, and I had like an hour-long conversation with one of their very knowledgeable people. And she was like, I was asking her, what should I do? Like I'm desperate here. I can't eat. And my weight is just dropping. And that's another thing. Like when I'm fasting, my weight is dropping.
Of course.
And then I need to get the weight back up because I'm going on the next treatment. And we were reasoning, and she was like, yeah, I think one of the most important things is you need digestive enzymes. And these are helping your body to break down food. So in your gut, you're going to have acid, like acid in your gut is helping you break down some things, but then you need the enzymes.
Is that like probiotics or?
No, enzymes are proteins.
Okay.
And if a protein is called an enzyme, it means it's helping you break down nutrients. And there's the different enzymes are specialized on different types of food. And I had one such pill before, but it wasn't strong enough. So I sourced from them the most expensive digestive enzyme from Thorn. I don't know if you're familiar with Thorn.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. They're like top performance supplements. And what it has is it has the most aggressive enzymes and like salts, like gall salt that comes from the gallbladder that is sent into your gut by the gallbladder to help digest proteins and fats. So I'm super boosting my gut in the first few days when I'm breaking fast by taking these heavy enzymes, and that's really helping.
Nice.
And then I'm also taking a number of plant compounds to soothe the gut and to like stimulate the gut. And there are a number of those that I take on pill form. And then, for example, I was recommended to take cayenne pepper, which is kind of stimulating the gut cells to be more active, which they need to start activating themselves. So it's not just about eating; it's also about how to support the system.
Right. Reintroducing the eating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I've had a lot of hurdles and challenges for every new cycle. There's a new challenge popping up. You think you've gotten it right, but then something changes and you need to adapt. And this was one of those. So that means I'm on a 5.5 day fast. if I successfully start breaking it at 5.5 days.
Yeah.
Some instances I've had to carry on without being able to digest food for another few days. But ideally, I'm able to break the fast after 5.5 days. So then I would have lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Every day you do water fasting, you're losing somewhere between 300 and 600 grams of body weight, at least. If you're more physically active, you might lose even more.
Yeah.
So that means like I'm losing 3-4 kilos, and then I need to regain those. So when I've up until recently I had 14-day cycles, so I had like a week when I'm dropping in weight, and then I just have a week to get back all the weight I've lost.
Yeah.
And it was clear like I wasn't able to do that. So there's this curve where I'm getting back up, but I'm not getting all the way back up, and then I'm getting lower and lower and lower. So my lowest point, or like when I started treatment, I was hovering around 87 kilos, sometimes 88, and now at my lowest point, I was down at 78.
10 kilos down.
Yeah, 10 kilos down, which it felt like a breaking point, kind of.
Yeah.
But then I've been able to fine tune the refeeding. So now it's like, what is it? 9. Yeah, I've extended the cycles now. So they're 3 weeks long, which is much better. Your body, when it's damaged, when it's broken down, you need more time to build back up. You're not like a robot where you can just bounce back up.
Yo-yo.
So now, since this last cycle, I have a 3-week cycle. So I'm 1 week where I'm just I'm protecting my system and everything's shut down. And then I start this refeeding and recovery phase where I start introducing food. Before that, I don't take any supplements. But then when I start introducing food, I also start introducing a whole load of supplements. And at the start, I was buying a lot of supplements based on reading articles, but I'm more and more gone towards that if it's possible, you should get it via food instead. Because sometimes it's not even like very high amounts you're getting from the pills either. And
right.
You need to think about how bioavailable it is. How will your body break this down and take up the nutrients if it's from a pill, as opposed to if it's part of a whole food. But I'm still convinced that some supplements do make a lot of sense, because our food isn't perfect.
Yeah, of course.
Even if you tweak it. And then there are other things to the recovery cycle as well, which is about like protecting and recovering from adverse effects of the treatment. But we can get to that later. It's about the nervous system, for example, for me, because one of the chemos, it's containing platinum, and that platinum compound, it's attacking my nerve cells.
Oh, damn. Before we get into that, can we do another quick bathroom break?
Sure.
All right, be right back. And we're back.
We're back.
So we were talking about supplements, side effects, training. Where do you want to go?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of supplements, it could be worth mentioning, like, I don't think there's a Bible or perfect book here, especially if you have cancer, and there are different types of cancer, so I wouldn't want to prescribe anything to anyone. But I could just, for transparency, I could list quickly some of the supplements I'm taking. And some of them I'm taking every day throughout the recovery phase. Some of them I'm just taking at parts of the recovery phase where I'm a bit more careful with it to start, and then I taper off before the next cycle. And then there's also the question of timing. So when would it be best to take them? And of course, how much? So there I kind of have a split between things I take in the morning before breakfast, things I would take if I have breakfast, things I would take if I have lunch, things I would take if I have dinner, and things I would take before going to bed, basically.
Right.
And the main ones there is lunch and dinner. Some of the things I am taking, when breaking the fast, I'm taking some plant compounds in pill form. It's like berberine, morinda, which is some kind of extract from a fruit, burdock root. In Swedish, it's called kardborrerot.
I've heard of that recently.
Which is, the way I bought it at least, it's in a solution form. So you add droplets to water and you mix the water. So those 3 I bought to help me break the fast when I had this crisis. And then in conjunction with those, I'm also taking a turmeric and black cumin pill, which is supposed to be very potent. I think it has some pepperine as well in it. So like black pepper. I'm also taking selenium on the regular. Selenium is supposed to be very good for your gut lining and to balance things out. I was superdosing selenium for a while during chemo, but now I stopped doing it because I was figuring if it's that good for your gut, and there were some studies, especially one type of selenium, that it's gonna selectively protect your healthy cells whilst attacking the cancer, kind of. But that's like edge case stuff. So you can fine tune this how much you want, and the problem is often it comes down to animal studies, because these supplements, they weren't studied in like a big double-blind human placebo trial.
Yeah, of course.
So when I was deciding which supplements to take, many of them it's like based on rat or mouse studies.
Right.
I just have to make a judgment call, basically, if I think the indication seems to be in the right direction or not.
Yeah, and also I guess try it out.
Yeah,
like you said, for every cycle you have, you learn something new.
Sure, but it's impossible. Like I would need to be able to A/B test myself.
Yeah, of course.
I could clone myself, and one Victor gets this treatment and the other one gets this. So selenium, and then like the normal culprits, like a vitamin complex, a lot of different B vitamins are the ones that you have a lot of different types.
Yeah,
many of them are good for nerve regeneration and nerve health, and for gut health and immune health. So that's like those are like the 3 main things I need to protect and heal.
Right.
The nervous system, the gut, and the immune system. And then like C vitamin. I have a pill which contains C vitamin and something called MSM in a mix. It's like methyl sulfonate something, which is also supposed to be good for your gut. There's a coenzyme Q10, which is supposed to be good for your gut and immune system.
You're like a walking pharmacy, huh?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know about Brian Johnson.
No, I don't.
Do you know? Like he became viral on YouTube a while back, like the guy who was gonna live forever. For a while, he looked like a robot with pale skin because he was like under eating.
Oh, okay.
But he's about longevity, and he's like, he was a millionaire or maybe a billionaire entrepreneur who sold his company, and then he figured he wanted to go all in on this health. So he started to become a guinea pig for all kinds of treatments and stuff.
Okay.
When I saw him a few years back, I saw his morning routine, and he was like just chugging down tens of pills. And I was a bit baffled. I was like, what the hell is this? Isn't it a bit too exaggerated? But I'm actually turning into that kind of guy now. So
I can imagine.
I didn't choose the life hacking path, but now I'm on it.
Yeah.
Not much choice, I feel. It's just survivor instinct.
Yeah.
And then like omega-3, I do eat a lot of fish, but omega-3 I do supplement. I bought zinc. Figured it might be good. When I remember to take it, I take magnesium in the evening. I do have a mineral pill that I could take in the morning when I remember to. But in terms of minerals, it's actually interesting because when I'm fasting, I don't want to have any supplements. I want my especially my stomach to be as inactive as possible.
Right.
So especially because of chemo, but also because you're drinking without eating, your body is gonna risk losing a lot of electrolytes. But chemo is also like pushing electrolytes balance to be off.
Yeah.
And if you buy an electrolyte solution off the shelf, it's gonna have some calories often. It has like a sweetener or the way those minerals are contained is together with an amino acid. So you're gonna get some calories from it. So I had to source 3 different salts basically for the 3 main minerals that I'm mixing myself. 2 of them are used in cooking and like home brewing, and the third one is just table salt. So that's to get the 3 main minerals. So you have the sodium, which you get from the sodium chloride, the table salt,
right,
or any kind of salt, like table kind of salt or Himalaya salt or whatever. And then you have the potassium, which I'm getting from, so this is during fasting, I'm getting it from the potassium carboxide, which is used in home brewing. It's called potash. And then the third one is magnesium, which I'm getting from magnesium chloride.
Right. Maybe even more interesting than the full breakdown is where you get your information, because everyone obviously will have different needs. Where do you get your information?
I'm
Googling, when it comes to all this stuff?
And then I try to find primary sources in terms of scientific papers. There's almost never a single source that could tell you the whole truth. You need to like have a handful of sources and triangulate. So I think I'm lucky to have a bit of the study background, because it would be much harder. And also like my English is decent. Some people might not have as easy a time neither with scientific language in general, but also with scientific English.
It can biology. It can be very tricky. I often study. What's the word I'm looking for? It's tricky getting through a scientific study and understanding what is meant, even if your English is good, because it's such a specific language.
Yeah, and sometimes with medicine, the researchers want to be very precautious as well,
right.
So they don't write things out very clearly. So you need to go into the details of the article to make your own assessment.
So you gotta have. I guess you get some experience when reading through them, but you gotta like put in some work to figure out how to read a study properly.
Yeah. And if you can't do it yourself, you might need to find someone else who can do it for you.
Fair enough.
But I mean, that's more or less what I'm taking in terms of supplements, and then also lactic bacteria, lactobacillus and such. So I have 3 different pills that I'm taking with each lunch and dinner, together with lacto-fermented foods. So like sour milk and like kimchi or sauerkraut, these kind of things.
Right.
But that's in terms of nutrition. And then I wanted to get to another challenge that I had. I was losing all of this weight, and I need to feed myself back up. I had a cycle where I was eating so much. I've counted, every cycle I've counted roughly how much I've eaten of everything. So I have like a calorie count for every meal every day. This cycle, I was eating so much. I was like eating maybe many days like twice as much as I would need to just maintain weight.
Right.
And I could swallow it. I wasn't throwing it up or anything. I was just kept on eating. And this carried on for like 6-7 days.
Okay.
Just overeating. But my body weight didn't go up as fast as I wanted it. So, and I had an issue after when I started the next round of treatment, that my body hadn't broken down all of this food. It was just in my system. So that meant my stomach was still active during chemo, and I got like bad effects of that.
Right.
So I need to do something. I need to change something. And what I realized was I hadn't been exercising. I hadn't been doing like resistance training for quite some time, because with each iterative cycle, I just felt weaker and weaker. So I didn't go to the gym, which I'd started going to the gym before getting the treatments.
Right.
Before my exercise was wrestling, but I can't do that because of the infection risk.
Right.
So I went to the gym with my brother, and then I just went fewer and fewer times with each cycle. But now I realize I need to break down my body. So I need to go and train and break down my body, because that's going to give it the signal that it needs to, so to say, super compensate. Because our bodies, they're all about responding to stress, responding to pressure from the outside. So it's not enough to just push a lot of food in. At least in my situation, it was clear. I need to like break down my body so it's going to overcompensate and build itself back up. And then it's going to build muscle, but it's also going to accumulate fat. And that's proven very beneficial. So in the last 2 cycles, when I started to do strength training much more focusedly, I'm able to gain weight in a much more stable fashion, and I'm not eating as much. So I'm not overeating nearly as much as I did before.
Nice.
I feel like I could still keep eating. Like there's no limit to how much I could eat, but I know now it's not going to help me.
Right.
Before I was like overcompensating by just eating so much. Yeah. And my stomach could kind of accept it, but it didn't understand that it needs to break down this food in order for me to grow. So that's also like a good learning. If you want to gain weight in a stable fashion, make sure to train. Don't just eat. I don't know, maybe it's possible for some of these Hollywood actors to just eat a lot of food, but it's probably not the best way to go about it. So that's like training, and I'm really happy to have done to start to become more serious with strength training. It's kind of just, I guess it was fate. It was fated. A few weeks before, I got a commercial on Instagram, and there was a familiar face there. Okay. And this guy, he was selling online coaching, and I saw that face, and I was directly, it's my old naturopath.
Oh, nice.
The guy who had treated, I've gone to twice, once for neck issues and once for my knee. So he'd done a really good job with that, and he had like a really good all-around perspective on health. And I saw on him, and when he was instructing me on doing like rehab exercises, that he really knew how to use his own body as well. And he's like a strong, holistic dude that's very functional in his training. So now he's switched around. So he's focusing on online coaching. So I joined his online coaching, which means he's giving me the strength training programs via an app. Okay. So I get them. He sends them to me for a specific day, and I just need to execute on that. Nice. And that's one of the learnings also. Like I cannot carry all of this on my own. I need to ask for help. I need to build a network or an army even. Like the way I see it, it's an army of soldiers, and we're all in this war together. And that's also the energy I want people to bring into the room when, even if they would feel saddened that I'm sick. I mean, it might sound rough, but you're not going to get anywhere by just feeling sad about it. You need to, if you're in a war zone, you can't just cuddle up in a corner because the enemy is coming. So you need to prepare. You need to prep yourself. You need to build up a supply line of resources. You need to think about strategy, and it's here now. It's not tomorrow. So there's a time crunch, and anytime I let energy pacify me, is gonna just help the enemy. So that's why I try to turn the mentality of anyone I speak to, whether it's about my own diagnosis or if they have a hardship, and it's not just about disease, it's about anything. Right. Just do your best to try and switch that to take some kind of action, some step forward. And I mean, we're all losing in the end. It's a losing game. Like there's only one outcome here, but we can extend the game, and we can try and have as fun as possible playing the game. Extend
improve the quality of the game.
Exactly. And like, sure. That's also an interesting aspect. I feel more creative now that I've gotten this like serious situation on my hands. I feel like there's a layer of there's like a protective layer of playing it safe that is coming off. It's like I'm shedding some skin where it might have been already in my head before that I don't feel like I'm censoring myself. I still feel like myself in any social setting, but now I'm like gradually more and more aggressively shedding that skin, that mask. It's coming off.
Being more you.
Yeah, which means very multifaceted me. Like I'm not just one person. I might have behaved like one person at work. Like, okay, this is the workplace Victor, and he has a flavor of who he actually is, but maybe not as many % of that flavor as could be there. Yeah. And then there's the Victor with his family. He might also have another flavor, but not fully 100% there. So I'm just trying to like mind meld all of these facets of myself and see what comes out. Just not trying to inhibit my instincts to create and like get things out there, communicating with people. And another important aspect of that is just reaching out to like long lost friends, like friends that I haven't talked to for a long while, and I feel like that's bouncing off as well. So they start reaching out to me, and I'm like spreading messages in social media, and people start to respond, and I get these beautiful conversations going, like you and me. So I just want to keep that going and see where that leads. Like the other day, yesterday, I released this quite experimental feature film. It's like a short film.
Okay.
If people come upon it on social media, they might not even recognize that it's a film, because it starts as a still image, and then 1 second in, I start to speak. It's like Cycle 5, Day 4, Victor's Odyssey, the battle, the inner war against the disfigurement of the self. And then I start speaking about like my cancer journey, my battle with cancer in a metaphorical sense. But for me, it's not just a metaphor. Like I feel that it is a war. And I do feel, in a weird way, I do feel a connection to like my Viking heritage. Because it's part of me, even if it's laid dormant. Like look at modern day Swedish society. It's not very Viking-esque. But I think if you just let yourself be inspired by a friend of mine, he wrote in the chat when he gave me some credit for it, he said like, you're using the archetypes,
the warrior,
like the archetypes of stories, but you're putting them in a real life context. And I think you can do that much more in your own life. Like if you want to be inspired by an archetype, just be inspired by that archetype. You don't need to ask for permission. You can be the hero of your own story. You can have a warrior mentality, even if you're just clocking in at work. You don't need to buy into a narrative that someone else has given you. So I feel like I'm more and more starting to create my own narrative, and I'm hoping that that's going to help other people to think that way as well. I think it's very empowering to be able to decide on your own perspective on situations, especially when you're facing like health issues.
Absolutely. I don't know what your Instagram was like before, but it's definitely a lot of like inspirational stuff and also fun stuff. I mean, you're letting loose, and then I think it's great.
I'm dancing, I'm fighting, I'm
singing in Persian. Loving it.
And I think next time I asked a friend, I want to sing in Finnish next. So I'm going to look into some Finnish folk music. If you have any from
Yugoslavia,
you just send it my way.
I'll send something too.
And if you want to do a duet, I wouldn't mind as well. I have like a Persian friend I want to do a duet with. I have a Moroccan friend I want to do a duet with. I just want to, just keep tracing those paths forward in terms of obviously solving my own health situation or like fighting for that, but also seeing the waves that can bring to a wider audience, whether it's talking to individual cancer people with cancer and see how I could maybe nudge them in some productive way, but also talking like I'm low-key manipulating the healthcare system based on my current situation. I'm tweaking a lot of things. I'm asking the oncologist to do this and that. So I'm like slowly trying to affect the healthcare system from within as well. I know I need to play with them. I'm not against them. And that's also an interesting, like important thing in this whole thing. I see an interesting perspective on people being faced with a serious disease. And some people tend to become passive. So they accept the paradigm of this is conventional treatment. These are the options you're given. This is the healthcare plan. And if you just stick to that, you're going to be doing the best you possibly can. If you just listen to the doctors and the nurses and you just accept the treatment, you're doing the best you can. And on the other side, you have the people who see the downside of conventional treatment and they back off. And they're like becoming a bit too critical of the flaws that do exist in this system. There are a lot of flaws. It's a huge colossus of a system. It's a lot of bullshit going on. I for one have noticed and discovered some things that were kind of pushed on me that I wouldn't want to touch.
Right.
One of them is cortisone, corticosteroids, which we could get into with your treatment as well. But then if you take too much of an issue with the flaws of the conventional treatment, you might risk going 100% the other direction, and suddenly you're ending up in some alternative therapy camp where you're not accepting anything that has some actual scientific literature behind it, and you're like just pushing back on that. You're kicking back like a donkey, and you're going to some healing retreat and hoping that will resolve the whole issue. And I think everyone needs to decide for themselves on a middle ground here. You can't just deny half of the truth, because there's truth in both camps. So you need to find where you are on this spectrum. But I think for the best of every individual, if they would like try and broaden their views, would be to find a middle ground here, somewhere in between. So if there's black and white, you need to think about which nuance of gray is it that I'm going to trace down. And that could change over time. You might find some new insights, which means maybe you're moving a bit more towards the conventional route in this aspect. Or maybe you're saying, okay, the conventional thing here is not enough. I need to do something more over here. But if you're not actively doing that, you're either becoming a victim of you're just victimizing yourself to be a passive agent in the conventional system, or you're fully denying the conventional alternatives and you're finding whatever else you're going to jump on. So taking ownership is not just about feeling a sense of ownership, which helps you mentally, but it's also to find that middle ground. And it's not just about treatment of a disease. It's thinking anything. Yeah, we have a tendency to think very black and white. Yeah, we are the good guys; those are the bad guys. Right. But I mean, that's always somewhere in the middle. That's what's creating conflict very often. That's what's creating a distance between people and situations. So. Yeah,
very inspirational stuff, man. I wrote to you on Instagram saying that I'm both inspired and impressed by what you're doing, because your inner Viking might have been dormant, but I saw some of that in our first conversation as well. I mean, from your submission wrestling background, I could tell already, like within a week after getting the diagnosis, that you were already trying to figure out how do I wrestle myself out of this situation. I mean, you are not ready to just give up or put your fate in someone else's hands. And that is very inspirational. A lot of people, for various reasons, struggle doing that. So seeing someone who does it, it's cool, man. It's very impressive. And I'm very grateful that you wanted to come here again and give us an update on your journey, because I think that can help a lot of people.
Thanks. Yeah, I know you need to get going, so we should wrap it up soon. But I mean, to you, I know you have some ongoing treatment. I'd love to keep discussing that off mic. And then anyone listening, if you feel like reaching out, if you have something you want to talk about health-wise, I'd be very happy to discuss. I'm not an expert on anything, but I have dedicated a lot of passion and time now in the last few months to my diagnosis, and I've touched upon other things as well. So if you want to talk to me, just reach out. You can either reach out via Facebook, just friend me, but then it might take some time, or just write me in Instagram. My handle is a bit weird. It's Victor_D_A_D_A. So Victor Dada, but with those
I'll put it in the description so people can find it.
Do feel free to reach out, because it's also helping me if I can bounce ideas off of other people, whether it's health issues or mental issues. Just happy to discuss, happy to reach out. I don't have a podcast yet, but I'm happy to chat in a similar way as Yoshi is doing in this great fashion. And I want to congratulate you on the 100th episode as well. Now,
thank you very much.
This will be a few months down the line to be published. So you'll probably be at like 110, 120.
Nah, not that much. Something like 105, 6, somewhere around there.
I mean, you just keep it going. And
I will.
I haven't listened to your first episodes, but I guess as anything, if you just get started, it's going to improve over time. And just like my strategy, you just fine tune it. And instead of just sitting there over analyzing things, you need to get started. And then things will come out of that, and you'll learn a lot, and you'll connect with other people. And
yeah, for sure.
As I say in my Instagram, just let's fucking go, team.
Let's fucking go. Fantastic closing words. Thank you very much, Victor. Really appreciate it.
For people off camera, you won't be seeing this, but I'm gonna ask Yoshi to do a warrior face in front of the camera. Are you up for that?
They might see it on your Instagram.
Are you up for that?
Of course.
Okay, let's
do
do
a warrior face.
Okay, in front of the camera.
Sounds good.
You've seen it, right?
I've seen it. Yeah.
You know, you practiced.
Yes.
You knew this would come.
It had to. It had to.
It had to come.
All right. Okay. So we're doing it now, or we're doing it after?
Yeah, we do it, and maybe there's like a faint echo sound of me grunting in the background, and that's like the end cap of the podcast. Then it's like fade out to the soundtrack.
Sounds good. Thank you for everyone who's been listening. See you next time. Let's wrap things up with the warrior face.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure. As I said, reach out if you want. Thanks, Yoshi.
Thank you.
Okay, we're bored.
All right.
Work.
Good shit. All right. Take care.